The little girl was barefoot in the snow when she appeared outside the Ghost Saints clubhouse at 2 in the morning, wearing nothing but a torn nightgown and bruises that looked like handprints around her throat. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there under the flickering neon sign, shaking from cold or terror or both, staring at the biggest man she'd ever seen through the frosted window. Ryder Vale, 6'4", scarred knuckles, 15 years in the Marines and 5 more drowning in whiskey, watched her through cigarette smoke and wondered if he was hallucinating again. Then she mouthed 2 words that changed everything. "He's coming." 60 seconds later, headlights appeared at the end of the mountain road. High beams. Moving fast. Hunting. Stay with us until the very end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. You won't believe where this story goes. The child's breath fogged against the clubhouse window in rapid bursts. Ryder crushed his cigarette into an ashtray shaped like a skull and stood slowly, his leather jacket creaking in the silence. Behind him, 3 other Ghost Saints looked up from their card game. Nobody spoke. They'd all seen that look before. The kind of terror that doesn't make noise because noise gets you killed. Ryder crossed the room in 4 strides and opened the door. Cold mountain air hit him like a fist. The girl flinched backward, bare feet crunching in the snow, but she didn't run. Her eyes locked onto his face, studying the scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his jaw, the stubble, the exhaustion carved into every line, looking for something, deciding something. "Inside," Ryder said quietly. "Now." She hesitated for exactly 1 heartbeat. Then she bolted past him into the warmth, leaving tiny red footprints across the wooden threshold. Blood. Her feet were torn up from running through the forest. Ryder's jaw tightened as he scanned the darkness beyond the property. The headlights were closer now, maybe 2 miles out, maybe less. He stepped back inside and locked the door. 3 deadbolts. Steel-reinforced frame. The clubhouse wasn't just a place to drink and work on bikes. It was a fortress. Had been since the club started taking in people the rest of the world threw away. "Tank," Ryder said without looking back. "Cut the exterior lights. Colt, get the shotguns. Mac, check the perimeter cameras." The 3 men moved without question. Tank, a 6'6" wall of muscle with a shaved head and burn scars covering half his neck, hit the breaker panel. The neon Ghost Saints sign outside went dark. The parking lot floods clicked off one by one until the only light came from inside the clubhouse and the approaching vehicle in the distance. Ryder turned to the girl. She'd backed herself into the corner beside an old jukebox, clutching her arms across her chest. Up close, he could see the full extent of it. Bruises and different stages of healing covered her arms. Rope burns around her wrists, a split lip that had scabbed over days ago. Whoever had her hadn't just hurt her once. This was systematic, prolonged, calculated. "What's your name?" Ryder asked, crouching down to her eye level, but keeping his distance. Some kids needed space more than comfort. "Avery?" Her voice came out like sandpaper, dry, exhausted. "Avery Knox." The name hit Ryder like a punch to the chest. He'd seen that name 2 months ago. Missing person posters plastered all over Black Hollow. 8-year-old girl vanished from her front yard during a birthday party. Massive search, FBI involvement. National news coverage for about 3 days before the media moved on to the next tragedy. The official theory was that she'd wandered into the mountains and died from exposure. But here she was, alive, broken, running. "Who's in that car, Avery?" What? Marcin. She shook her head violently. "You can't let him take me back, please. He said if I ran again, he'd..." Her voice cracked. She pressed her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with fresh panic. Colt appeared from the back hallway, carrying 2 Remington 8700s and a hunting rifle. He was the youngest of the group at 26, baby-faced except for the prison ink covering his forearms and the hollowness behind his eyes. 3 tours in Afghanistan. Medically discharged after an IED turned his Humvee into a coffin for everyone except him. He tried to eat a bullet 6 months later. Tank had found him in a motel bathroom and dragged him to the clubhouse instead. "Cameras are up," Mac called out from the security monitor set up near the bar. Mac was older, mid-50s, gray beard, reading glasses perched on his nose. Former Army Ranger turned high school teacher until his daughter disappeared 15 years ago. The police never found her, never really looked. Mac had been searching ever since, and somewhere along the way he'd stopped being a teacher and started being something else entirely. Ryder stood and moved to the monitors. 4 screens showed different angles of the property. The main gate, the road leading up to the clubhouse, the parking lot where a dozen Harleys sat covered in frost, and the tree line where the headlights had just stopped moving. The vehicle was a black Escalade, tinted windows, Wyoming plates. It sat there idling for 30 seconds while Ryder watched and the clubhouse held its collective breath. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out wearing an expensive wool coat and leather gloves. Even on the grainy security footage, Ryder recognized him. Walter Grayson, owner of Grayson Cattle Company, largest employer in Black Hollow. Donated to every charity event, sat on the town council, showed up in the local paper every month, shaking hands and cutting ribbons, and smiling like a man who'd never done a single wrong thing in his entire life. "Jesus Christ," Mac whispered. Avery made a sound behind them, something between a whimper and a gasp. Ryder didn't need to turn around to know she was looking at the screen, didn't need to ask if that was the man she was running from. Walter stood beside his vehicle for a long moment, staring at the darkened clubhouse. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. The conversation lasted maybe 20 seconds. When he hung up, he got back in the Escalade, turned around, and drove away. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The engine noise faded into the distance until the only sound was the wind rattling through the pine trees and the old furnace kicking on in the basement. "He's coming back," Avery said from her corner. "He always comes back with more people." Ryder turned to look at her. More people meaning what? Men with guns, sheriff deputies, sometimes both. She was shaking harder now despite the warmth from the furnace. "He owns everyone. My mom tried to tell the police. They said she was crazy. Put her in the hospital for a week. When she got out, he'd already taken me." The words hung in the air like smoke. Tank shifted his weight, boots creaking against the floorboards. Colt set the shotguns down on the pool table with deliberate care. Mac pulled off his reading glasses and pressed his fingers against his eyes. Ryder had heard stories like this before. Overseas. Small villages where the local warlord was also the police chief and the judge and the landowner. Where power meant you could do anything to anyone and nobody would stop you because nobody could stop you. He'd just never expected to find it in Wyoming. "There are others," Avery continued, her voice barely above a whisper now. "Other kids. At his ranch? In the basement? He keeps us down there and sometimes people come visit and..." She stopped, pressed her lips together so hard they turned white, shook her head like she could shake the memories loose and leave them on the floor. Ryder walked over to the bar and poured 4 fingers of whiskey into a glass. His hand didn't shake, but it wanted to. He downed the drink in one swallow and set the glass down harder than necessary. "How many kids?" Mac asked quietly. 6 when I left, but kids disappear sometimes. He says they got adopted, but I heard screaming once, and Avery's voice broke completely this time. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, arms wrapped around her knees, rocking slightly. The clubhouse went silent again except for the wind and the furnace and the sound of Ryder's breathing getting deeper and slower as he fought to keep something dark and violent locked away behind his ribs. He'd spent 15 years in combat zones learning how to compartmentalize rage. Another 5 years drowning it in alcohol and motorcycle engines. But standing there watching an 8-year-old girl describe a nightmare that should never exist in America, that was testing every single lock he'd built inside himself. "We need to call someone," Colt said. "FBI, state police, someone." "And say what?" Tank's voice rumbled from near the door. "That a missing kid showed up claiming the richest man in the county is running a trafficking operation? They'll take her back to social services and she'll disappear again before sunrise." "Tank's right," Mac added. "Grayson owns half the county officials. The other half are too scared to touch him. This isn't a law enforcement problem. It's a corruption problem." Ryder stared at the empty whiskey glass. His reflection looked back at him, scarred, exhausted, haunted. He thought about his own daughter, Sophia, 7 years old when the custody battle ended. Lawyers and judges, and a system that favored money over truth. His ex-wife's new husband had connections, campaign donations, the right last name. Within 6 months, Ryder's visitation rights were gone. Within a year, they'd moved to another state. He hadn't seen Sophia in almost 8 years now, didn't even know if she remembered him. Some men spent their lives trying to be good. Ryder had spent his trying to survive being bad at being good. Ryder? Tank was watching him with the kind of careful attention you'd give to a wild animal deciding whether to attack or run. What do you want to do, Bishop? The question sat heavy in the room. This wasn't a club vote. This wasn't a democracy. Ryder was the road captain. His word was law inside these walls. Whatever happened next would be on him. All of it. The consequences. The fallout. The bodies, if it came to that. He looked at Avery. She'd stopped rocking and was staring at him now, with an expression he'd seen on the faces of Iraqi civilians waiting for American soldiers to either save them or leave them to die. Hope mixed with resignation. The look of someone who'd learned that help usually doesn't come, and believing in it anyway is just another way to get hurt. We're going to need more people, Ryder said finally. How many saints can we get here in the next hour? Tank pulled out his phone. 8. Maybe 10 if we pull in the guys from the northern chapter. Call them, all of them. Ryder, Max said carefully. If we do this, if we go after Grayson, there's no walking it back. This isn't a bar fight. This is going to war with the entire power structure of this town. I know what it is. Do you? Max stepped closer, voice dropping low. Because I've been down this road. I spent 15 years trying to find my daughter through legal channels. Know what I learned? The system isn't broken. It's working exactly how it was designed to work. It protects people like Grayson. It grinds up people like us and spits us out. If we do this, we're going to lose everything. Ryder met his eyes. What exactly do I have left to lose? The question hung unanswered because they both knew the answer was nothing. Ryder had nothing except his bike, his leather jacket, and the ghost saints. No family, no career, no future beyond the next bottle of whiskey and the next stretch of empty highway. He'd been circling the drain for 5 years now, waiting for something to finally pull him under. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the thing that would finally break him completely. Or maybe it was the thing that would make him into something other than a ghost. Get me a blanket and a first aid kit, Ryder said, turning back to Avery. And someone call Doc Martinez. Tell him we need him here now. Don't explain why over the phone. The men moved. Tank stepped outside onto the front porch to make calls, his breath fogging in the mountain air. Colt disappeared into the back storage room and returned with a wool blanket and a red medical kit. Mac grabbed his jacket and headed for his bike, already dialing Doc Martinez's number. Ryder approached Avery slowly, holding the blanket out. She flinched but didn't pull away when he draped it over her shoulders. Up close, he could smell the forest on her, pine sap and dirt, and the metallic scent of blood from her torn feet. I need to ask you some hard questions, Ryder said quietly. Can you handle that? She nodded, but her hands were shaking where they gripped the blanket edges. How many men does Grayson have working security at the ranch? 4, sometimes 5. They all have guns. What about cameras? Outside the main house, not in the basement. How many entrances to the basement? 2. 1 from inside the house. 1 emergency exit that goes to the barn. Is it locked? Always. Big metal door with a padlock and a chain. Ryder filed the information away methodically, building a mental map of the target. It had been years since he'd done tactical planning, but the muscle memory was still there, buried under whiskey and trauma. The other kids, do you know their names? Avery's voice got smaller. Emma, she's 6. And there's a boy named Marcus, but everyone calls him Bug because he's really small. And Sarah and Jenna, they're sisters. And Thomas, he's been there the longest. Maybe 2 years. 2 years. Ryder felt his jaw clench so hard his teeth ached. A child had been held captive for 2 years less than 30 miles from where they were standing, and nobody had done anything. Nobody had noticed. Or worse, people had noticed and chosen not to see. Avery, I need you to listen to me very carefully, Ryder said. We're going to get those kids out, all of them. But I need you to stay here where it's safe. Can you do that? You promise? Her eyes searched his face with an intensity that made him want to look away. You promise you'll save them? Ryder had learned a long time ago not to make promises he couldn't keep. had learned that hope was just another weapon people used to hurt you. But looking at this 8-year-old girl who'd run barefoot through a frozen forest to find help from a motorcycle club, full of dangerous men because nobody else would listen, lying to her felt worse than any other sin he'd committed. "I promise," he said. The words tasted like ashes in his mouth, but Avery's shoulders dropped with relief. She pulled the blanket tighter and nodded, some of the terror finally easing from her expression. She believed him. God help him, she actually believed him. The sound of motorcycles echoed up the mountain road. Not just one or two. A dozen engines at least, their collective roar building like an approaching storm. Ryder stood and moved to the window. Headlights appeared through the trees, bikes rolling in formation toward the clubhouse. The northern chapter was arriving. Within 10 minutes, the parking lot was full of Harleys, and the clubhouse was full of men. Ghost saints from 3 different chapters, all wearing the same leather cut with the same skull patch on the back. They ranged in age from early 20s to late 60s. Combat veterans and ex-cons, and men who'd fallen through every crack society had to offer. Men with missing teeth and scarred knuckles and eyes that had seen too much. But when they walked inside and saw Avery sitting in the corner wrapped in a blanket, something shifted in the room. The aggressive energy that had entered with them softened into something else, something protective and dangerous in equal measure. Ryder gave them the short version. Missing kid, trafficking operation, local businessman with too much power, a ranch full of children who needed extraction, no legal backup, no official support, just them and their bikes and whatever weapons they could carry. "This is volunteer only," Ryder said, scanning the faces around him. "Anyone who wants out, take your bike and go. No judgment. No questions." Nobody moved toward the door. "All right then." Ryder walked to the center of the room where a large table held maps of the county. He unfolded one showing the area around Grayson's ranch. "Tank, I need you in the northern chapter to handle perimeter security. Anyone tries to come in or out, you stop them. No exceptions." Tank nodded, his massive arms crossed over his chest. "Colt, you're with me on entry. We go in through the emergency exit in the barn, fast and quiet until we're not." "Copy," Colt said, already checking the magazine on his pistol. "Mac, you take 3 men and cover the main house entrance. If anyone comes out, you hold them until we're clear." "Well, what about police response?" someone asked from the back. "If Grayson calls the sheriff—" "He will," Ryder interrupted. "Which is why we have maybe 30 minutes from the moment we breach to the moment this becomes a hostage situation with us as the hostages. So we move fast. Get the kids out. Get them to the vehicles. And we disappear into the mountains before badges arrive." "And if badges are already there," another voice asked. "If Grayson has deputies on site." Ryder's expression went flat. "Then it gets complicated." The room understood what complicated meant. It meant the line between rescue operation and armed conflict became very thin. It meant people might die. It meant they were all gambling their freedom and possibly their lives on the hope that they could get 6 children out of hell before the men who put them there could stop it. "One more thing," Ryder added. "When we get those kids out, they're going to be scared, traumatized. They're going to see a bunch of armed men in leather jackets, and they're going to think we're there to hurt them. So when we find them, weapons down, hands visible. Let them see we're not a threat. Understand?" Heads nodded around the room. These men might look like outlaws and criminals, but most of them had kids of their own. Knew what it meant to be scared. Knew what it took to make a child feel safe when the world had proven it wasn't. Doc Martinez arrived 20 minutes later, a thin man in his 70s with gentle hands and a medical bag older than most of the bikes outside. He'd been patching up ghost saints for 15 years, asking minimal questions and charging nothing. In return, the club made sure nobody messed with his free clinic downtown. He examined Avery's feet in silence, cleaning the cuts and wrapping them in gauze while she sat perfectly still. When he finished, he stood and looked at Ryder with an expression that was equal parts resignation and respect. "Whatever you're planning, be careful," Doc said quietly. "I'm too old to stitch up a massacre." "Noted," Ryder replied. By midnight, the plan was set. By 12:30, the Ghost Saints were on their bikes rolling down the mountain in a formation that looked more like a military convoy than a motorcycle club. No lights? No noise except the rumble of engines. The temperature had dropped to 15 degrees and the wind cut through leather like razor wire. Avery stood at the clubhouse window watching them disappear into the darkness, still wrapped in the wool blanket. Tank's girlfriend, a fierce woman named Rosa, who ran the club's bookkeeping and took no shit from anyone, sat beside her with a shotgun across her lap. "They're going to bring your friends home," Rosa said softly. Avery didn't respond, just pressed her small hand against the cold window glass and whispered something that might have been a prayer, or might have been goodbye. 3 miles away, Walter Grayson stood in his ranch house office holding a glass of bourbon and staring at his phone. The security alert had come through 5 minutes ago. Motion sensors triggered along the eastern property line. Cameras picking up heat signatures moving through the trees. Multiple vehicles approaching from the north ridge. He'd made 3 calls. First to his head of security, second to the county sheriff, third to a number in Colorado that most people didn't know existed. The man who answered in Colorado had listened in silence and then said 2 words, "Handle it." Walter set his phone down and walked to the window. In the distance, he could see headlights moving through the darkness, not police vehicles, too spread out, too coordinated. He recognized the pattern from news footage he'd seen years ago. Military convoy tactics, motorcycle club, the Ghost Saints. Walter had heard stories about them. Violent men who lived by their own code. Dangerous but usually predictable. Stay out of their business and they'd stay out of yours. But if the girl had reached them, if she'd told them anything. He picked up his phone and made one more call, this one to his wife. "Wake the children," he said calmly. "Get them upstairs. Lock the bedroom door and don't come out until I tell you." His wife knew better than to ask questions. She simply hung up and did what she was told. Walter opened his desk drawer and removed a Glock 19, checked the magazine, chambered around. Then he walked downstairs to the basement door, unlocked it, and descended into the darkness where 6 children sat in the cold, confused about why they were being moved in the middle of the night. "Change of plans," Walter said pleasantly, as if he were talking about vacation arrangements. "We're going to play a different game tonight." Outside, the sound of motorcycles grew louder, closer, inevitable. And somewhere in that formation of Harleys cutting through the frozen darkness, Ryder Vale gripped his handlebars tighter and thought about promises made to broken children and whether a man like him could ever keep one that mattered. The ranch appeared through the trees. Security lights illuminated the main house, barn dark and silent beyond it. Everything looked peaceful, normal, exactly the kind of place you'd never suspect held horrors in its basement. Ryder raised his fist. The entire convoy stopped as one. No turning back now. He kicked his bike back to life and led the Ghost Saints toward the gates of hell, wondering if any of them would make it back out with their souls intact. The gates to Grayson's ranch stood 12 feet high, wrought iron with security cameras mounted on both posts. Ryder killed his engine 50 yards out and raised his fist again. Behind him, 23 Harleys went silent in perfect synchronization. The sudden absence of sound felt louder than the engines had been. Just wind through pine trees and the creak of leather as men dismounted in the darkness. Tank rolled up beside Ryder, his massive frame blocking out the stars. "Cameras are hardwired. Cut the power and they switch to battery backup. We're going to be visible the second we breach." "Yes, I know." Ryder pulled a bolt cutter from his saddlebag, the metal cold enough to burn through his gloves. "That's why we're not sneaking." He walked straight to the gate, positioned the cutters on the chain, and squeezed. The chain snapped with a crack that echoed across the frozen valley. The gate swung open slowly, hinges screaming like wounded animals. Every security camera on the property would have registered the breach. Every alarm would be screaming inside Grayson's house. They had maybe 3 minutes before the response started. Ryder climbed back on his bike. The Ghost Saints followed him through the gate in a tight formation, riding slow and deliberate up the long driveway toward the main house. Motion sensor lights kicked on in sequence, turning the approach into a spotlight parade. There was no hiding now, no element of surprise, just forward momentum and the cold mathematical certainty that violence was coming. The ranch house loomed ahead, 3 stories of timber and stone that probably cost more than every bike in the convoy combined. Lights were on in the upper windows, someone moving behind curtains. The barn sat dark and silent to the east, exactly where Avery had described it. Ryder stopped his bike 30 yards from the main entrance. The other Saints spread out in a semicircle, engines idling, leather cuts visible under the security floods. They looked like exactly what they were. A small army of dangerous men come to collect a debt. The front door opened. Walter Grayson stepped onto the porch wearing the same wool coat from earlier, but now there was a pistol visible in his right hand. Behind him, 4 men emerged carrying rifles, AR-15s, tactical gear, the kind of security you didn't hire for a cattle ranch. They fanned out across the porch with military precision, weapons raised but not yet aimed. "You're trespassing," Walter called out, his voice steady and reasonable like he was discussing weather. "Turn around and leave before this becomes a legal problem." Ryder killed his engine and dismounted. The silence felt thick enough to drown in. He walked forward slowly, boots crunching in gravel, until he was 20 feet from the porch, close enough to see Walter's face clearly, close enough to see the man wasn't scared, wasn't even particularly concerned, just mildly annoyed at the inconvenience. "We're here for the children," Ryder said. "What children?" Walter's expression didn't change. "There are no children here except my own, and they're upstairs sleeping. So unless you have a warrant, don't need a warrant." Ryder's voice stayed flat and cold. "Need about 3 minutes in your basement." Something flickered across Walter's face. Not fear, calculation. He glanced at the armed men beside him, then back at Ryder and the wall of motorcycles behind him. Doing math, weighing options, wondering if he could win this fight. "You're making a mistake," Walter said carefully. "I have friends. Important friends. The kind who don't appreciate your friends aren't here." Ryder took another step forward. "We are." One of the security guards shifted his grip on his rifle, finger moving toward the trigger guard. Tank's hand dropped to the pistol on his hip. The air pressure changed. That moment before a storm breaks when every animal instinct screams at you to find cover. Then headlights appeared at the main gate. 2 sheriff's vehicles came up the driveway fast, light bars dark, but engines loud. They skidded to a stop between the Ghost Saints and the house, doors flying open. 4 deputies emerged with shotguns and sidearms drawn, taking defensive positions behind their vehicles. The lead deputy was a man in his 40s with a gut hanging over his duty belt and eyes that looked tired of everything. He surveyed the scene, bikers, armed security, Walter on the porch, and his expression went flat with the kind of exhaustion that comes from cleaning up messes you didn't make. "Everybody lower your weapons," the deputy said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd said this exact sentence 1,000 times before. "Now." Nobody moved. "I said lower your goddamn weapons before I start arresting people." Tank slowly removed his hand from his pistol. The other Saints followed his lead. Walter's security team kept their rifles raised. "That means you too, Mr. Grayson," the deputy added. Walter hesitated, then nodded. His men lowered their weapons but didn't put them down. The deputy walked forward until he was standing between Ryder and the porch, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. "Let me guess," the deputy said. "Someone reported a disturbance, and you gentlemen decided to handle it yourselves?" "We have reason to believe children are being held against their will in that basement," Ryder said evenly. The deputy's jaw tightened. "You have proof of that?" "Eyewitness testimony." "From who?" "Avery Knox said." The name landed like a grenade. The deputy went very still. Walter's expression shifted into something colder. One of the other deputies whispered something that might have been, "Jesus Christ." "Avery Knox is dead," the deputy said finally. "Been dead for 2 months. Search teams found—" "They found nothing," Ryder interrupted. "Because she wasn't dead. She was here. Until tonight when she escaped and came to us." "That's insane." Walter's voice rose slightly, the first crack in his calm facade. "That girl disappeared months ago. Everyone knows she wandered into the mountains. This is harassment based on a ghost story told by criminals with—" "Then you won't mind if we check your basement," Tank rumbled from behind Ryder. "I mind very much." Walter's hand tightened on his pistol. "This is my property, my home. Unless you have a warrant, you have no legal right." "Oh, actually they do." The voice came from one of the other deputies, a younger man with a thin mustache and nervous energy. He was staring at his phone screen, face pale. "There's an Amber Alert. Just went out 20 minutes ago. 6 missing children from 3 different counties. Last known connection is—" He looked up at Walter. "It lists this address as a location of interest." The deputy in charge snatched the phone and read the screen. His expression went from tired to sick in about 3 seconds. He looked at Walter, looked at the house, looked back at Ryder and the Ghost Saints. "Mr. Grayson," the deputy said slowly, I'm going to need you to consent to a search of your property. Absolutely not. Or I can get a warrant, which will take about 30 minutes, and in that time I'm going to have to detain everyone here, including you. And if there's even a chance those children are in that basement and something happens to them while we're waiting on paperwork, every news station in the country is going to ask why I didn't act faster. The math was changing. Ryder could see it on Walter's face. The moment a powerful man realizes his power has boundaries after all. That money and connections only stretch so far when you're standing in front of witnesses with cameras in their pockets and deputies who aren't entirely on your payroll. Fine, Walter said through clenched teeth. Search whatever you want. You'll find nothing. But his eyes said something different. They flicked toward the barn. Just once. Just for a second. But Ryder caught it. The deputy started toward the house. Walter stepped aside to let him pass, his security team lowering their weapons completely now. The other deputies followed, shotguns still ready, but no longer pointed at anyone. The entire scene was shifting from standoff to official procedure, which was exactly when Ryder realized they'd lost. He turned and walked quickly back to Tank, lowering his voice. He moved them. That look toward the barn. He moved them before we got here. You sure? Oh, you saw his face when we mentioned the basement. He wasn't scared, wasn't even defensive. That's not how guilty men react unless they've already cleaned up the evidence. Tank's expression darkened. So what do? We split up. Deputies search the house, we search the barn. If those kids are on this property, we find them before he has time to move them again. And if the deputies tell us to stay put, then we ignore them. Tank grinned, the kind of grin that had gotten him dishonorably discharged and made him a legend in 3 different prisons. I was hoping you'd say that. Ryder signaled to Mac and Colt. They broke away from the main group and moved toward him, reading the situation instantly. Mac was already pulling a heavy flashlight from his jacket. Colt had his hand near his concealed pistol. Barn, Ryder said quietly. Now. Before anyone notices. They moved as a unit, peeling away from the main cluster of saints and vehicles, walking quickly, but not running toward the dark structure to the east. The security lights didn't reach that far. Shadows swallowed them after 30 feet. Behind them, the deputies entered the house with Walter following, his face a mask of calm confidence. The ghost saints stayed by their bikes, watching everything, engines still warm and ready to run. The barn was old timber construction, probably 50 years, large enough to hold equipment and livestock. Double doors on the front, padlocked. No lights inside. Ryder pulled his bolt cutters out again and made quick work of the lock. The doors swung open with a groan. Darkness inside. Deep and complete. Mac clicked on his flashlight. The beam swept across empty stalls, rusted farm equipment, stacks of hay bales covered in dust. Everything looked abandoned, forgotten. Exactly the kind of place you'd overlook during a casual search. There. Mac's light stopped on a door at the back of the barn. New metal frame, heavy deadbolt, completely out of place among the rotting wood and rust. They crossed the barn floor fast, boots loud on packed dirt. Ryder grabbed the deadbolt and yanked, locked. He aimed his bolt cutters at the lock mechanism and squeezed with everything he had. The metal screamed and bent but didn't break. Move! Tank had followed them. He raised one massive boot and kicked the door just below the lock. The frame cracked. Second kick sent it flying inward. A staircase descended into darkness. Cold air rolled up smelling like earth and mildew, and something else. Something human. Fierce sweat. Unwashed bodies. The smell of people trapped in small spaces for too long. Ryder started down. The stairs were concrete, recently poured. The walls were finished drywall. This wasn't a root cellar or storage space. This was deliberate construction, built to be hidden, built to be soundproof. The stairs ended at another door. This one wasn't locked. Ryder pushed it open. The room beyond was maybe 20 feet square with concrete floors and cinder block walls. LED shop lights bolted to the ceiling. 6 small cots arranged in 2 rows. Blankets, pillows, children's drawings taped to the walls, stick figures and houses and suns that looked like they'd been drawn by kids trying to remember what the outside world looked like. But no children. The cots were still warm, blankets thrown aside. A stuffed animal on the floor near the door like someone had dropped it running. They'd been here minutes ago, maybe less. Jesus fucking Christ. Mac's voice broke. He walked to one of the drawings, a crayon picture of a little girl holding a teddy bear under the words, "I want to go home." His hand trembled as he touched the paper. Tank moved to the cots, checking under each one methodically. Fresh water bottles. Food wrappers from this morning. They were here. Recently. Colt was staring at the far wall where someone had been marking days. Tally marks scratched into the paint with something sharp. He counted under his breath. 743 days. Someone's been down here for over 2 years. The air in the room felt thick and poisonous. This wasn't theoretical anymore. Wasn't based on the story of a traumatized kid who might have been confused or lying. This was real, documented, undeniable. 6 children had been living in this concrete box for months, years, and they were gone now because Walter Grayson had known they were coming. Ryder felt something crack inside his chest. That last piece of control he'd been holding on to. The part that made him a road captain instead of just another violent bastard with anger issues and PTSD. It snapped clean and the darkness underneath came flooding out. He turned and walked back up the stairs, crossed the barn, emerged into the security lights. Walter was on the porch again, talking to the lead deputy, gesturing dismissively, like this whole thing was a waste of everyone's time. Ryder started walking toward them. "Ryder!" Tank's voice behind him, warning. "Don't!" He kept walking. The deputy saw him coming and held up one hand. "Sir, I need you to—" Ryder walked past him, up the porch steps, and grabbed Walter by the front of his expensive coat, slammed him back against the wall hard enough to crack the timber siding. "Where are they?" Ryder's voice came out like gravel and broken glass. "Get your hands off me!" Ryder slammed him again, harder. Walter's security tried to move but found themselves facing Tank and Colt and Mac with the Ghost Saints flowing in behind them like a tide. The deputies were shouting, drawing weapons. But nobody was shooting yet because nobody wanted to be the one who started a massacre. "Last chance," Ryder said. "Where are they?" Walter's eyes hardened. Blood ran from his split lip, but he smiled anyway. "You're too late. They're already gone. Off the property, somewhere you'll never find. And now you've assaulted me in front of law enforcement. Congratulations. You just destroyed whatever credibility that little bitch gave you." Ryder pulled his fist back. "Ryder." Tank's roar cut through everything. "Don't." The word hung in the frozen air. Ryder's fist trembled 6 inches from Walter's face, every muscle in his body screaming at him to follow through, to break this man's jaw, his ribs, every bone, to make him hurt the way those children had been hurting. But Tank was right. Hitting Walter now would make Ryder the criminal, would make everything they'd found in that basement inadmissible, would give Walter's lawyers exactly what they needed to make this disappear. Ryder lowered his fist slowly, released Walter's coat, stepped back. Walter straightened his jacket, still smiling. "Smart decision. Now get off my property before—" The punch came from Mac. The older man moved faster than anyone expected, his fist connecting with Walter's nose with a crack that echoed across the valley. Walter went down hard, blood pouring between his fingers as he clutched his face. The deputies swarmed, hands on weapons, shouting. Mac didn't resist when they grabbed him, just stared down at Walter with an expression that was equal parts satisfaction and despair. "That's for my daughter," Mac said quietly, "and every other kid you've taken." The lead deputy forced Mac to his knees, pulling zip-tie cuffs from his belt. "You're under arrest for assault. You have the right. Bawutesi." I know my rights." Mac's voice was calm. Spent 15 years studying them, learning how men like him use them as weapons, how the system protects predators and prosecutes protectors. "So go ahead. Arrest me. Give him exactly what he wants." The deputy paused, looking between Mac and Walter and the blood on the porch. His expression suggested he was calculating something, trying to figure out how this would play in a courtroom, how it would look in headlines, whose story would win. "Everyone back to your vehicles," the deputy said finally. "Now." "What about him?" Ryder gestured to Walter, who was struggling to his feet, coat ruined, face a mess. "You saw what's in that barn. You know what he did." "What I saw was an empty room. What I know is you broke onto private property, damaged multiple locks, and one of your people assaulted the owner. Unless those children show up, all I have is your word against his, and his word comes with about 12 lawyers and the deed to half this county. So that's it? Tank's voice was dangerous. He gets away with it? He gets investigated, properly, by actual law enforcement, not by a motorcycle club playing vigilante. The deputy met Tank's eyes. You want justice? Let the system work. The system doesn't work, Max said from his knees. That's the whole fucking problem. The deputy didn't respond. He finished securing Max's cuffs and walked him to one of the patrol vehicles. Another deputy was helping Walter to his own car, calling for an ambulance, treating him like the victim he'd convinced everyone he was. The ghost saints stood in the security lights watching it happen. 23 dangerous men who'd come to save children and instead found nothing but empty rooms and a system designed to protect exactly the wrong people. Ryder walked back to his bike slowly. His hands were shaking, not from cold, from rage, from the feeling of being so close to justice and watching it slip away through legal loopholes and corrupt officials and a rich man's smile. Tank followed him. What now? Now? Ryder stared at the ranch house, at the lights, at Walter being loaded into an ambulance like he was the injured party. Now we regroup, think, figure out where he moved those kids. And Mac? They'll process him, charge him with assault. He'll be arraigned in the morning. Ryder's jaw clenched. We'll bail him out, but Tank... He turned to face the bigger man. Mac was right. He just threw away his freedom for one punch. That's not sustainable. We can't win this way. Then what way can we win? Ryder didn't have an answer. He climbed on his bike and started the engine. Around him, the ghost saints did the same. The convoy rolled back down the driveway in formation, leaving the ranch behind but carrying the weight of failure like stones in their pockets. They rode in silence back to the clubhouse. The temperature had dropped to single digits. Ice formed on their beards and eyebrows. By the time they pulled into the parking lot, the sky was starting to lighten with false dawn. Avery was at the window when they arrived. Rosa stood beside her. The moment Avery saw their faces, saw that they'd returned without the other children, her expression crumbled. She didn't cry, just turned away from the window and sat down on the floor, arms wrapped around her knees, rocking slightly. Ryder killed his engine and sat there for a long moment staring at nothing. Behind him, the other saints dismounted slowly, removing helmets, lighting cigarettes, nobody talking because there was nothing good to say. Tank appeared beside Ryder's bike. We need a new plan. I know. Something that doesn't involve direct assault. I know. Well, something that actually fucking works. I know. Ryder finally looked at him. But I don't know what that is. We had him. Had the location, had witnesses and evidence and timing, and we still failed. Because he knew we were coming. Someone tipped him off. The words sat heavy between them. Ryder had been thinking the same thing but hadn't wanted to say it out loud. Make it real. You think we have a rat? Ryder asked quietly. I think someone made a phone call. Grayson moved those kids in the 30 minutes between when Avery escaped and when we arrived. That's not luck. That's information. Ryder felt the darkness inside him spreading. Bad enough to fight external enemies. Worse to think someone inside their own brotherhood might have betrayed them. Betrayed those children. We keep this quiet, Ryder said. Don't accuse anyone. Just watch. Listen. See who's nervous. Who's making calls they shouldn't be making. Tank nodded slowly. Then he glanced back at the clubhouse where Avery sat with her shattered hope. What do we tell her? The truth. That we tried. That we failed. That we're going to try again. She's not going to believe us. I know, but we say it anyway. Ryder dismounted and walked toward the clubhouse. Each step felt heavier than the last. He pushed through the door into the warmth and cigarette smoke and quiet murmuring of men processing their own failure. Avery looked up at him with eyes that had already learned not to hope. Rosa put a hand on her shoulder, but didn't say anything. Ryder crouched down in front of Avery, keeping distance, keeping his voice level. The other kids weren't there. He moved them before we arrived, but we found where they'd been kept. We have evidence now, real evidence. We're going to use it. To do what? Avery's voice was small and broken. Tell more police who work for him? Write more reports nobody reads? To find them and bring them home. You promised. Tears ran down her cheeks now. You promised you'd save them. I know. But you didn't. You left them there. With him. The accusation hit harder than Walter's security team could have. Harder than anything. Because she was right. They'd failed. Broke their promise. Left children in hell because they weren't smart enough, or fast enough, or powerful enough to pull them out. I'm sorry, Ryder said. The words felt worthless. I'm so fucking sorry. Avery turned away from him, facing the wall, her small body shaking with silent sobs. Rosa pulled her close, glaring at Ryder like this was somehow his fault. Maybe it was. Maybe every piece of this disaster was his fault for thinking a broken Marine in a motorcycle club full of damaged men could fix anything. He stood and walked to the bar, poured 4 fingers of whiskey, downed it, poured another. Around him, the Saints were pulling off leather jackets, checking weapons, avoiding eye contact. The energy in the room was toxic. Failure mixed with rage, mixed with shame, mixed with the growing suspicion that one of them might have caused all of this. The door opened. Everyone's hand went to their weapons before they saw it was just Colt, returning from checking the perimeter. But his face was wrong, pale, scared. He was holding his phone. We have a problem, Colt said. Another one? Tank asked bitterly. Colt turned his phone around. On the screen was a video, grainy security footage. The timestamp showed 30 minutes ago. The location was unclear but appeared to be some kind of industrial building. Warehouse, maybe? In the frame, 6 children sat huddled together on a concrete floor while armed men stood guard around them. The video had been sent from an unknown number with a single message. Looking for something? Bote? The room went silent except for Avery's muffled crying and the sound of Ryder's glass hitting the bar top hard enough to crack. It's a trap, Tank said. Has to be. He's dangling them in front of us to see what we'll do. Or he's taunting us, someone else added, proving he can move them anywhere and we can't do shit about it. Ryder stared at the video, at the children's faces, at the fear in their eyes, at Thomas, the boy who'd been held for over 2 years, sitting in the back with his arms around a smaller girl, trying to protect her from men with rifles. Send that to everyone, Ryder said quietly. Every news station, every FBI field office, every child advocacy group, flood the internet with it. It's anonymous, Colt said. No metadata, no location data. We send it out and Grayson's lawyers will claim it's fake, doctored, that we manufactured it to frame him. So we're just supposed to do nothing? I didn't say that. Colt zoomed in on the video, pointing at something in the corner of the frame. Look, behind the kids. That stack of crates has a logo. It's faded, but I can make out part of it. Looks like industrial refrigeration equipment. Tank moved closer. Black River Cold Storage? Shut down 3 years ago when the owners got busted for tax fraud. Building's been empty since. Where? Ryder asked. About 40 miles north, right on the Montana border. Just empty. Ryder felt something shift inside him. This was different than the ranch. This wasn't a surprise raid on Walter's home territory with law enforcement watching. This was a direct challenge, a middle finger. Walter was telling them exactly where the children were and daring them to do something about it. It's definitely a trap, Ryder said. He'll have more security this time, probably law enforcement on standby. The second we show up, he'll have us for armed assault, kidnapping, maybe domestic terrorism, depending on how creative his lawyers feel. So we don't all show up, Colt said. Small team, in and out. Grab the kids and disappear before anyone knows we were there. And if it goes wrong, Tank asked, if it's a setup and we walk into an ambush, then some of us don't walk back out. Easy. The clubhouse went quiet again. Everyone doing their own math, weighing their lives against 6 children they'd never met. Wondering if dying for strangers was noble or just stupid. Wondering if anything they did would even matter in a world that seemed designed to protect predators and punish protectors. Ryder looked around the room, at Tank with his burn scars and prison record, at Colt with his PTSD and suicide attempts, at the Northern Chapter bikers who barely knew him but had shown up anyway, at Mac's empty chair where he should have been sitting but wasn't because he'd traded his freedom for one punch at a guilty man. These were broken people. Violent people. People who'd been told their entire lives they were worthless, told they didn't matter, told to stay in their lane and accept that the world wasn't fair and some children just slipped through the cracks. But they'd shown up anyway, ridden through a blizzard toward danger anyway, broken their promises but kept trying anyway. Maybe that was enough. Maybe trying and failing was better than not trying at all. Or maybe he was just looking for excuses to walk into another fight he couldn't win, because violence was easier than admitting he couldn't save anyone, including himself. "I'm going," Ryder said finally. "Alone if I have to, but I'm going." "Bullshit." Tank stepped forward. "You go, we all go. That's how this works." "Not this time. This is different. This is—" Ryder struggled to find words that weren't just machismo and self-destruction. "This is probably going to end very badly. Prison. Or worse. I won't ask you to follow me into that." "You're not asking. We're telling." Tank looked around the room. "Who's with me?" Every hand went up. Every single saint. Even the ones who'd just met Ryder tonight. Even the ones who had kids at home and jobs they'd lose and lives that could be destroyed. They all raised their hands anyway. Ryder felt something in his throat. Something he hadn't felt in years. Something that might have been hope, or might have been grief, or might have been both at once. "All right then," he said quietly. "Gear up. We leave in 30 minutes, and this time," he paused, meeting each person's eyes. "This time, we don't leave without them. No matter what." The saints moved, checking weapons, loading magazines, making phone calls to people they loved just in case those calls ended up being the last ones. The clubhouse transformed from a bar into a staging area. Body armor appeared. Tactical vests. Medical supplies. These men might look like outlaw bikers, but underneath the leather and tattoos, they were combat veterans who knew exactly how to prepare for war. Ryder walked back to where Avery sat with Rosa. The girl looked up at him with eyes that wanted to believe but couldn't quite manage it anymore. "We're going to try again," Ryder said. "We're going to bring them home." "Or die trying?" Avery asked. She was 8 years old, but the question was ancient. Old as every promise adults made and broke. Old as every child who learned trust was just another word for future betrayal. "Or die trying," Ryder confirmed, because lying to her felt worse than telling her the truth. Avery stared at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small and dirty. Her stuffed rabbit. The one she'd been holding when she'd first run into that diner. She held it out to him. "For luck?" she said, quietly. Ryder took the rabbit carefully, like it was made of glass. It smelled like fear and forest and survival. He tucked it into his jacket pocket next to his heart and nodded once. Then he turned and walked toward the door where 23 motorcycles waited in the dawn light, and every single man climbing onto them knew they might not be climbing off again. The engines started one by one, rolling thunder, war drums, the sound of broken men riding toward one last chance at redemption or damnation, and not particularly caring which. Ryder kicked his Harley to life and led them north toward Montana, toward Black River cold storage, toward 6 children and whatever trap Walter Grayson had prepared. Behind them, Avery stood at the window holding Rosa's hand, watching them disappear into the sunrise, wondering if she'd just watched 23 men ride toward their own execution. And in that moment, neither Ryder nor Avery nor any of the ghost saints knew that the real betrayal hadn't happened yet. That the trap wasn't at Black River cold storage. That the call Walter Grayson had made to Colorado had just been answered. And that the men now driving toward the clubhouse from 3 different directions weren't local security or even corrupt cops. They were something far worse. Something the ghost saints had no preparation for. Something that was about to turn this rescue operation into a bloodbath that would make national news and force Ryder Vale to make a choice between saving the children or saving his brotherhood. A choice where both options meant sacrifice. Both options meant loss. And only one option meant he'd ever be able to look at himself in a mirror again. They were 15 miles from Black River cold storage when Ryder's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him pull over. The convoy stopped behind him, engines idling in this gray morning light. The text was short. "Turn around. Now. They're coming for the girl." Ryder stared at the words. His hands went cold despite his gloves. He showed the screen to Tank. "Could be Grayson," Tank said, "trying to split us up. Or it could be real." Ryder looked back toward Black Hollow, toward the clubhouse, toward Avery and Rosa and the handful of saints they'd left behind to guard them. How many did we leave at the clubhouse? 4 plus Rosa, Sayet. 4 men. Against what? Against who? Ryder tried to think it through, but his thoughts kept fracturing. This felt wrong. All of it. The video had been too easy, too obvious. Like someone wanted them exactly where they were, 15 miles away from everyone they'd left unprotected. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo. The clubhouse parking lot. 3 black SUVs pulling in. Men in tactical gear spilling out. Body armor, assault rifles, moving with military precision toward the front door. Fuck! Ryder didn't wait for discussion. He spun his bike around and opened the throttle. Behind him, the Saints did the same. The entire convoy reversing course, engines screaming as they accelerated back toward Black Hollow. 15 miles. At highway speeds, maybe 12 minutes. Ryder pushed his Harley past 90, leaning into curves that should have killed him, the frozen wind tearing at his face. His phone was mounted on his handlebars. He tried calling the clubhouse. No answer. Tried Rosa's cell. Straight to voicemail. 10 miles. 8, 6. His phone buzzed with another text. This time it was a video. 10 seconds. No sound. The clubhouse interior. Rosa backing away from the door with a shotgun. The 4 Saints taking defensive positions. Then the door exploding inward and armed men flooding through. Muzzle flashes. Bodies falling. Rosa going down. The screen going black. Ryder's vision narrowed to a tunnel. His breath came in ragged gasps. He pushed the bike harder, feeling the frame shudder under him, knowing he was one mistake away from a crash that would turn him into a smear on the highway. 4 miles. 3. 2. They came around the last bend and saw the smoke, black columns rising from where the clubhouse should have been. Ryder's heart stopped. He pushed even harder, the speedometer needle buried, time stretching and compressing until he couldn't tell if he'd been riding for seconds or hours. The clubhouse came into view. Still standing, but burning. Flames eating through the roof. The parking lot full of shattered glass and shell casings. The 3 SUVs already gone. The front door hanging off its hinges. Ryder skidded to a stop, dropped his bike, and ran inside before anyone could stop him. The interior was a war zone. Overturned furniture. Bullet holes in every wall. Blood pooled on the wooden floor in dark spreading circles. He found the first body near the bar. Young Saint named Derek. 24 years old, 3 tours in Iraq, shot twice in the chest, eyes open and empty. The second body was by the pool table. Another Saint, 40 years old, father of 2, head wound, gone before he hit the ground. Ryder kept moving, boots tracking through blood, his hands shaking as he searched. Found the third body near the back hallway, the fourth near the kitchen. All dead. All Saints. All men who'd trusted him to know what he was doing. But no Rosa, no Avery. Tank appeared beside him, breathing hard. They took them. Rosa and the girl. SUVs headed north about 8 minutes ago. How do you know? Neighbor across the road. Called 911. Said she saw 2 females being forced into vehicles. Tank's voice was tight, controlled. The kind of control that comes right before someone breaks completely. Ryder. This wasn't Grayson. This was professional. Military-grade tactical assault. Body armor. Coordinated entry. These weren't local security guards. Bull is lying. Ryder already knew. Had known the moment he'd seen the video. Walter Grayson was a predator, but he was also a coward. This kind of operation required resources, training, the kind of backing you didn't get from cattle company profits. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, this time a call. Ryder answered. Are you starting to understand? The voice was male, mid-50s, calm, professional, the kind of voice that gave orders and expected them to be followed. This was never about one little girl or one businessman. This is about a network, a very lucrative, very protected network, and you just declared war on it. Who the fuck are you? Someone who's been cleaning up messes for 30 years. Your friend Walter made the call yesterday, said some bikers were causing problems, getting close to things they shouldn't be getting close to. So I came to handle it. You killed 4 of my men. I removed obstacles, just like I'm going to remove you unless you make the smart choice right now. Walk away. Forget everything you've seen. Go back to selling drugs and fixing motorcycles and whatever else you people do. Leave this alone. Just die. And if I don't, then I kill the woman and the child. Then I kill everyone in your club. Then I burn Black Hollow to the ground and make it look like a biker gang war. And when the smoke clears, the network keeps operating, and you're just another dead criminal nobody will remember. The line went dead. Ryder stood in the burning clubhouse, surrounded by blood and bodies and the ruins of everything he'd tried to protect. Around him, the remaining saints were arriving, dismounting, taking in the carnage with expressions that ranged from shock to rage to something deeper and darker. Colt appeared at his side, face pale. Jesus Christ, Derek and Marcus, and his voice broke. They're all, I know. What do we do? It was the same question Tank had asked earlier. The same question that kept getting asked, and Ryder kept not having answers, kept making decisions that got people killed, kept promising to save children, and instead watched his own brotherhood get slaughtered. Tank was shouting orders. Get the bodies out before the structure collapsed. Salvage what weapons they could. Clear out before fire department and cops arrived. The saints moved mechanically, carrying their dead brothers outside, faces streaked with soot and tears. Nobody talking because there was nothing to say that wouldn't make it worse. Ryder walked outside into the cold morning air. His bike lay on its side where he'd dropped it. He picked it up slowly, his hands moving on autopilot while his brain tried to process the last 30 minutes. Tried to understand how everything had fallen apart so completely. We need to leave. Mac appeared from somewhere. He looked wrong, different. Ryder realized with a start that Mac should have been in jail, should have been getting arraigned. But here he was, standing in the parking lot wearing the same clothes from last night, but no cuffs, no guards, no explanation. How are you here? Ryder asked. Released on my own recognizance. Judge signed off on it this morning. Assault charges dropped. Grayson declined to press. That doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. Mac's eyes were red-rimmed, but his voice was steady. But we need to move, now, before whoever did this comes back to finish the job. Ryder looked at this burning clubhouse, at the bodies lined up in the parking lot covered with leather jackets, at the remaining saints gathering weapons and ammunition with the efficiency of soldiers who'd done this too many times before. Where do we go? Someone asked. Clubhouse is gone. They know where we live, where we work. They'll pick us off one by one. We scatter, Tank said. Different directions. Make it harder to track us all. No! The word came out of Ryder's mouth before he'd fully formed the thought. We don't scatter. We don't run. We end this. And what? We don't even know who we're fighting. Yes, we do. Ryder pulled out his phone and stared at the screen, at the call log showing the unknown numbers. We're fighting a network, something big enough and protected enough that they can send hit squads and make assault charges, disappear and burn buildings in broad daylight without consequences. Something that has connections in law enforcement, government, everywhere. So we're fucked, Colt said flatly. Can't fight that. Can't even touch it. Maybe not directly. Ryder looked up, his mind finally clicking through the fog of shock into something sharper, colder. But every network has a weak point. Usually it's the money. Follow the money, you find the people. Find the people, you find leverage. We don't have time for an investigation, Tank argued. They have Rosa and Avery. They're probably already dead, the Ryder finished. Or they will be soon, unless we give them a reason to keep them alive. What reason? Bait. They wanted us to walk away, which means we're a threat. Which means we know something or have something they can't afford to let get out. Ryder started pacing, his boots crunching through broken glass. The video, the one Grayson sent showing the kids at Black River. That wasn't just taunting, that was a test. He wanted to see what we'd do with it. We didn't do anything with it. Exactly. We kept it private. Came after the kids ourselves instead of going public, which means they still think they can contain this. Control the narrative. Make it all disappear. Ryder stopped pacing and faced the group. So we stopped trying to contain it. We blow it wide open. Send that video everywhere, every news station, every social media platform, every FBI field office and congressional representative and advocacy group we can find. Make it so big they can't bury it. And that saves Rosa and Avery how? Mac asked quietly. Because once it's public, killing them becomes a liability instead of damage control. Right now, they're loose ends. Witnesses. But if the story's already out, if everyone knows what Grayson did, killing them just confirms the story. Makes it worse. turns them into martyrs instead of problems. The logic was cold, brutal, based on the assumption that the people who just murdered 4 saints and burned their clubhouse were rational actors who made decisions based on risk management. It was also the only plan Ryder had. Tank studied him for a long moment. That's assuming they're rational. Assuming they won't just kill everyone involved and let their lawyers sort it out later. You have a better idea? Grandma. Silence. Because nobody did. They were outgunned, outmaneuvered, and out of options. Going public was a Hail Mary, but it was the only play left. Do it, Tank said finally. Send everything, but do it anonymously. Route it through proxies. Make it impossible to trace back to us. Colt pulled out a laptop from his saddlebag. I can handle that. Need about 20 minutes. You have 10. Ryder turned to the other saints. Everyone else, gear up. We're not waiting around to see if this works. We find Rosa and Avery ourselves. How? They could be anywhere. North, the neighbors said the SUVs went north toward the Montana border, same direction as Black River Cold Storage. Ryder felt the pieces clicking together. It wasn't a trap. Not the way we thought. They wanted us chasing our tails while they hit the clubhouse. But they still need that location for something. Storage, staging area. Maybe that's where they're taking Rosa and Avery. Or maybe it's where they're going to execute them, someone muttered. Probably true. But Ryder couldn't think about that. Couldn't let himself imagine what might be happening to them right now. Had to stay focused on the next step. The next decision. The next chance to make this right, even though nothing about it felt right. His phone buzzed. Another text. Another photo. This time it showed Rosa tied to a chair in what looked like a concrete room. Her face was bruised. Blood ran from her nose. But she was alive, looking directly on the camera with defiance that hadn't been beaten out of her yet. The message below the photo. Last chance. Walk away or watch them die slowly. Ryder showed it to Tank. The big man's jaw clenched so hard it looked like his teeth might crack. Colt, Ryder called out. How long? 5 minutes? Maybe less. Colt's fingers flew across the keyboard. Creating shell accounts. Routing through Tor nodes. Making sure this can't be traced. Make it 3 minutes. Ryder walked to his bike and started checking weapons. His Glock had a full magazine. The spare in his jacket pocket was loaded. He had a knife in his boot. It wouldn't be enough against trained military contractors, but it was what he had. Around him, the other saints were doing the same. Loading rifles, checking body armor, distributing ammunition. They moved with grim efficiency, men who'd accepted that this might be their last fight and decided they were going to make it count. Mac appeared beside Ryder again. There's something you need to know. Unless it's the exact location of Rosa and Avery, I don't want to hear it. It's about why they released me, why the charges got dropped. Ryder paused, hands stilling on his gun. What about it? Mac's expression was complicated. Guilty, ashamed, resigned. The judge who signed my release, his name is Richard Holbrook. He's been on the bench for 20 years. Clean record. Respected. But 3 years ago, his teenage son disappeared, vanished on the way home from school. No body, no evidence. Case went cold. So this morning, Judge Holbrook received a package. Inside was his son's wallet, and a note saying if he wanted to see the boy alive, he'd release me and lose the paperwork on the Grayson assault. The words hung in the freezing air. Ryder felt something twist in his gut. They have his son? Have or had? I don't know. But Holbrook believed it enough to do what they wanted. Mac's voice dropped lower. Ryder, that's what we're up against. These people don't just kill witnesses. They collect leverage, hold children hostage for years, use them to control judges and politicians and anyone else they need controlled. This isn't just a trafficking ring, it's a blackmail operation, a power structure built on stolen kids and terror. Ryder's mind raced through implications. How many children were really missing? How many cases like Judge Holbrook's son were actually unsolved mysteries? And how many were carefully orchestrated control mechanisms? How deep did this network go? Done. Colt looked up from his laptop. Video is uploaded, sent to 372 different recipients. News stations, FBI, senators, advocacy groups, every major media outlet in the country. It's out there. Can't be pulled back now. Tank checked his phone. Already seeing it pop up. Local news just posted it. Hashtag starting to trend. The damage was done. Irreversible. Within an hour, every news outlet in America would be running the story. Within 2 hours, federal agents would be crawling all over Black Hollow. Within 3 hours, Walter Grayson's life would be over. But that didn't save Rosa and Avery. Not if the people holding them decided revenge was more important than risk management. Ryder's phone rang. Same unknown number as before. He answered. You just made a very serious mistake. The voice was colder now, angry. The professional calm starting to crack. That video is going to cause problems. A lot of problems. Problems that will take years to fix. Good. You think this helps your friends? You just signed their death warrants. No. I made them too valuable to kill. Right now, every law enforcement agency in the country is looking for those children. If Rosa and Avery turn up dead, it becomes a federal murder investigation. You become the most wanted men in America. But if they turn up alive, you have leverage. Witnesses who can testify you weren't the ones who took them, that you were just hired muscle, that the real villains are still out there. Silence on the line. Ryder could almost hear the calculations happening, the risk assessment, the weighing of options. You're smarter than you look, the voice said finally, but you're also assuming we care about getting caught, assuming we haven't planned for this, assuming we don't have people inside every agency you just sent that video to. Maybe, but you can't have people everywhere, and even if you do, you can't control the narrative once it's this public. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to release Rosa and Avery. You're going to disappear back to whatever hole you crawled out of, and we're going to pretend this was all Grayson's operation. And if we don't, then I hunt every single person in your network, one by one, for the rest of my life, and I burn everything you've built to the fucking ground. Another pause. Longer this time. You're not in a position to make threats. Neither are you. Not anymore. That video makes you radioactive. Every cop and agent is going to be looking at anyone connected to Grayson, including the mystery military contractors who showed up and murdered 4 people in a motorcycle clubhouse. You want to stay in the shadows? Then cut your losses. Let the women go. Blame everything on Grayson. And get out while you still can. The line went dead. The line at. Ryder stood there holding his phone, adrenaline crashing through his system. He didn't know if the bluff had worked, didn't know if the people on the other end would call it. All he knew was he'd just escalated a situation that was already spiraling out of control, and there was no way to predict what happened next. Heads up, Tank was watching the road. We've got company. 3 police vehicles came up the highway, lights flashing but sirens off. They pulled into the parking lot and deputies emerged with weapons drawn. The same lead deputy from Grayson's ranch. He looked at the burning clubhouse, at the bodies covered in leather, at the 20 armed bikers standing in the parking lot, and his expression went from tired to exhausted. Nobody move, he said without much conviction. This is a crime scene. Everyone needs to... Stand down, deputy. A new voice. A black sedan had pulled up behind the police vehicles. 3 people in suits emerged, FBI badges visible on their belts. The lead agent was a woman in her 40s with gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that had seen every type of human evil. She walked past the deputy like he wasn't there and stopped in front of Ryder. Special Agent Carmen Reeves, FBI Violent Crimes Against Children. I need to know everything, right now. Yeesh, me, mopo, eat. Ryder glanced at Tank, at Mac, at the other Saints. They'd spent their entire adult lives not talking to cops, not trusting federal agents, not cooperating with systems that had failed them over and over. But looking at Agent Reeves, Ryder saw something different. Not the exhaustion of a local deputy stuck between corruption and duty. Not the indifference of bureaucrats pushing papers. He saw rage, barely controlled. The same rage he felt. The rage of someone who'd been fighting this war for years and watching guilty people walk away because they had the right connections. It started 2 nights ago, Ryder said, when a little girl showed up at our clubhouse running from a man who'd kept her prisoner for 2 months. He told her everything, Avery's story, the raid on Grayson's ranch, the hidden room, the missing children, Mac's arrest and mysterious release, the attack on the clubhouse, the phone calls, the threats, Rosa and Avery's kidnapping, all of it, every detail. When he finished, Agent Reeves was typing furiously on her phone. The video you released, I need the original file, unedited, everything. Colt handed over a USB drive. It's all there, plus screen recordings of the text messages, the coordinates from where the video was sent, everything we have. Reeves plugged it into her laptop right there in the parking lot, watched the video 3 times, zoomed in on details, made calls to people she didn't name. When she finally looked up, her expression was grim. Black River Cold Storage, that's our next stop, but I need you to understand something. She looked directly at Ryder. What you've stumbled into is bigger than one trafficking case. We've been investigating this network for 3 years, following money, building cases, trying to identify everyone involved. You just burned all of that by going public. And people are dying right now, Ryder said. Kids are being held right now. You want me to apologize for not waiting around while you build airtight cases? I want you to understand that the second that video went live, everyone involved started destroying evidence, killing witnesses, disappearing. In the next 24 hours, we're going to lose 90% of our leads because you couldn't wait. So arrest them now, before they disappear. With what evidence? Anonymous video that defense lawyers will claim is doctored? Testimony from a traumatized child? Without solid forensics and financial records and cooperation from insiders, everyone we arrest walks, and then they're untouchable. Can't be tried twice for the same crime. Ryder felt the weight of it, the realization that his desperate attempt to save 2 people might have actually made everything worse, that going public had warned the entire network to scatter, that Rosa and Avery might die anyway, and the people responsible would never face justice. So what do? He asked quietly. We move fast. Hit Black River before they can clear it. Hope we find physical evidence. Hope we find Rosa and your missing girl. Hope we get lucky for once, instead of watching guilty people win. Agent Reeves turns to her team. Get tactical support, hostage rescue, medical standing by, and someone find out who owns Black River Cold Storage now. I want the full paper trail. One of her agents looked up from his phone. Buildings owned by a holding company. Mountain Range Properties, LLC. Registered in Delaware. Silent partners. But I'm seeing connections to several companies that already flagged in our investigation. Names. The agent hesitated. Senator Crawford, Judge Holbrook, Police Chief Bennett, and about 30 others including Walter Grayson. This isn't just a trafficking ring. This is organized crime with institutional protection at every level. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Senator, judge, police chief, these weren't corrupt individuals. This was systematic. A network of powerful people using their positions to protect each other while children disappeared into basements and warehouses and concrete rooms that didn't officially exist. Agent Reeves closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had shifted, a decision made. Fuck protocol, fuck jurisdiction, fuck the careful approach. She looked at Ryder. You want justice? Real justice? Then you're going to help me burn this entire thing down, starting right now. How? By doing exactly what you've been doing. Being loud, being visible, being the violent criminals they think you are. Because while you're drawing attention and making noise, my team is going to be in the background tracing every dollar, identifying every player, building cases that will actually stick. You be the chaos. We'll be the cleanup. Awesome. All shays chutishiyanness. Ryder understood what she was offering. A partnership. An alliance between federal law enforcement and a motorcycle club full of violent felons. It violated every rule. Broke every protocol. Would probably end both their careers if it went wrong. But maybe that was what it took. Maybe the system was so broken that the only way to fix it was to work outside it. All right, Ryder said. But Rosa and Avery come first, before cases, before arrests, before anything else. Agreed. Agent Reeves extended her hand. Ryder shook it. Her grip was iron. Let's go get them. The convoy that rolled toward Black River Cold Storage 30 minutes later looked like something out of a war movie. FBI tactical vehicles, police units, 20 ghost saints on Harleys, all of them armed, all of them done with patience and procedure and playing by rules that had never protected anyone. The sun was climbing higher now, burning off the morning fog, the temperature rising into the low 20s, ice melting in patches along the highway. Everything looking clean and innocent, like the world wasn't full of stolen children and murdered bikers and networks of powerful predators. Ryder's phone buzzed. He almost didn't look, but something made him check. Another photo. This time showing Avery, tied to a chair next to Rosa, both of them alive, both looking directly at the camera. Behind them, visible in the background, was a metal door with the logo burned into it. Black River Cold Storage. They were there, right where Ryder had guessed, waiting. Whether as bait or prisoners or something worse, he didn't know. The message below the photo. Come alone or they die. Ryder showed it to Agent Reeves. She swore creatively. It's a trap. Has to be. They want you isolated so they can... I know what they want. Ryder checked his Glock one more time, but they're not getting it. So what's the play? Same as before. I go in loud. You come in quiet. And we hope they're too busy with me to notice you until it's too late. That's not a plan. That's suicide. You have a better idea? She didn't. None of them did. They were improvising, making it up as they went, hoping desperation and rage would be enough to overcome training and planning and overwhelming firepower. Black River Cold Storage appeared through the trees, massive concrete building, abandoned for years but showing signs of recent activity. Fresh tire tracks in the mud, generator running somewhere, armed men visible on the roof. Ryder counted at least 8 hostiles, probably more inside, all carrying military-grade weapons, all positioned to turn the building into a kill box. He thought about turning around, about letting Agent Reeves call in more support, about doing this the smart way. Then he thought about Rosa and Avery tied to chairs in that concrete room, about the 4 dead saints in the clubhouse parking lot, about promises made and broken, and the chance that maybe this time he could actually keep one. He revved his engine once, twice. A signal. Then he dropped into gear and rode straight toward hell, the ghost saints roaring behind him, Agent Reeves shouting orders into her radio, and somewhere in that building, 2 terrified women waiting to see if rescue was coming, or if this was just another betrayal in a life full of them. The first shot rang out when he was 50 yards from the entrance. Ryder twisted the throttle and the world exploded into gunfire and engine roar, and the sudden crystal-clear certainty that in the next 60 seconds he was either going to save them or die trying, and there was no longer any difference between those 2 outcomes. The bullet hit Ryder's front tire and the world went sideways. His Harley fishtailed at 70 miles per hour, rubber shredding, metal screaming against asphalt. He fought the handlebars, but physics won. The bike went down hard, sliding across the parking lot in a shower of sparks while Ryder rolled free, leather jacket taking most of the damage until he slammed into a concrete barrier and felt something crack in his ribs. Couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Just pain and the sound of more gunfire and Tank's voice roaring somewhere behind him. Hands grabbed him, dragged him behind cover. Colt's face appeared above him, pale and terrified. "Stay down! Stay the fuck down!" Mope. But Ryder was already moving, pushing himself up despite the fire in his chest. His Glock was still in his hand. Miracle it hadn't gone flying. He checked the magazine by muscle memory while his vision cleared enough to see what they were up against. 8 hostiles on the roof like he'd counted. 4 more emerging from inside the building, all wearing black tactical gear, all carrying weapons that cost more than most bikes. Professional military contractors moving with coordinated precision that made the Ghost Saints look like amateurs playing dress-up. The bikers had taken cover behind their motorcycles and concrete planners, returning fire but outgunned badly. Tank's shotgun boomed. Mac's rifle cracked. But for every shot they fired, 20 came back, tearing chunks out of concrete and punching through metal. The FBI tactical team was hanging back, taking defensive positions behind their vehicles, clearly waiting for orders from Agent Reeves, who was screaming into her radio about rules of engagement and jurisdiction and backup that wasn't coming fast enough. Ryder's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with shaking hands. Another text from the unknown number. "Last warning, leave or everyone dies." He typed back with bloody fingers. "Come out and make me." 3 seconds later, the front entrance of Black River Cold Storage exploded outward. Not from a bomb, from a vehicle. A black Humvee came crashing through the metal doors at full speed, armored and unstoppable, headed straight for the FBI position. Agent Reeves dove sideways. Her team scattered. The Humvee plowed through their vehicles like they were made of cardboard, crushing metal and fiberglass, turning tactical units into twisted wreckage. It fishtailed in the parking lot, rear door flying open, and more armed men poured out. Now they were surrounded. Hostiles on the roof. Hostiles from the building. Hostiles from the Humvee. Maybe 20 shooters total against 12 Saints and 5 FBI agents. Fall back! Agent Reeves was on her feet somehow, blood running from a cut on her forehead. Everyone fall back to the tree line. But falling back meant leaving. Meant abandoning Rosa and Avery inside that building. Meant running away while 2 women died because Ryder had made promises he couldn't keep. No. He stood up fully, ribs screaming, and started walking toward the building. Not running. Walking. Deliberate. His Glock raised. Ryder, what the fuck are you doing? Tank's voice. He didn't answer, just kept walking. Fired twice at a hostile on the roof. Both shots missed but made the man duck. Fired again at the Humvee. The bullet sparked off armor plating but drew attention. Suddenly all 20 guns were tracking him instead of the people behind cover. You wanted me? Ryder shouted. Here I am, just me. Let the women go and you can do whatever you want. A man stepped out from behind the Humvee, mid-50s, graying hair. The kind of face that looked normal, trustworthy. The face of someone you'd never suspect was capable of orchestrating mass murder. He wasn't wearing tactical gear, just jeans and a jacket. But every man around him deferred to him like soldiers to a general. Ryder Vale. The man's voice was the same one from the phone. Calm, professional, almost friendly. You're either very brave or very stupid. Little of both. Ryder kept walking, 20 feet now, 15, close enough to see the man's eyes. They were flat, empty. The eyes of someone who'd stopped seeing people as people a long time ago. The women, now. You're not in a position to negotiate. Neither are you. That video's been seen by 500,000 people in the last hour. FBI's here. More coming. You kill me in front of federal agents and you'll never make it out of Wyoming. We've made it out of worse. The man pulled a pistol from his jacket, aimed it casually at Ryder's chest. But you're right about one thing. This has gotten messy, sloppy. Walter Grayson was supposed to be discreet. Instead, he drew attention, made mistakes, and now we have to clean it up. By killing everyone? By disappearing, something we're very good at. He gestured with the pistol toward the building. Your friends are inside, basement level. You want them? Go get them. But understand that the second you walk through those doors, my men are going to kill everyone out here. Your biker friends, the FBI agents, all of them. You get to choose. Save 2 people or save 20. Can't have both. The choice landed like a punch to an already broken rib. Ryder looked back at Tank and Mac and Colt, at Agent Reeves and her team, at the ghost saints who'd followed him into this nightmare because they believed he knew what he was doing. They were watching him, waiting, trusting him to make the right call, even though there was no right call. Just lesser evils and impossible mathematics, and the cold certainty that people were going to die no matter what he chose. Don't do it, Tank called out. It's a trap. You go in there, you're dead. Probably true. Almost certainly true. But Ryder had spent 5 years waiting to die anyway. Drunk driving on empty highways, bar fights with men bigger than him. Slow suicide disguised as living. Maybe this was just a faster version. Maybe dying for something actually mattered more than dying for nothing. He started toward the building. Ryder, goddammit! Tank tried to follow, but gunfire drove him back into cover. The man with the pistol smiled. Smart choice. Your friends have maybe 10 minutes. After that, my patience runs out and we start executing them one by one until you come back out. Ryder didn't respond. Just walked through the shattered entrance into the darkness beyond. The temperature dropped immediately. No heat. No lights except emergency signs and the gray morning light filtering through broken windows. His boots crunched on broken glass and spent shell casings. The smell hit him. Mildew and old blood and human waste. The smell of a place where terrible things happened regularly. A staircase descended into deeper darkness. He clicked on his phone's flashlight and started down, Glock raised, every step sending fire through his damaged ribs. The stairs went down 2 levels. 3, finally ending at a steel door. Unlocked. He pushed it open. The basement was exactly what Avery had described. Concrete walls, LED lights, but different than the room under Grayson's barn. This was bigger, industrial. Rows of chain-link cages built like prison cells. Most were empty, but 3 still had people inside. Rosa was in the first cage, tied to a chair, face bruised, lip split, but alive. Her eyes went wide when she saw him. "Ryder, it's a trap. I know." He shot the padlock off the cage door. It took 3 rounds and the ricochet nearly hit him, but the lock shattered. He kicked the door open and moved to Rosa, cutting the zip ties with his knife. "Can you walk?" "I think so, but Avery—" "Where?" Rosa pointed to the far end of the basement. Ryder helped her stand, gave her his knife since he only had 1 gun, and moved toward the other cages. Found Avery in the 3rd one. She was curled in this corner, arms wrapped around her knees, shaking violently. When she saw him, something in her face broke. "You came," she whispered. "You actually came. Told you I would." Ryder shot this lock too, pulled the cage door open, knelt down despite the pain. "We need to move. Fast. Can you run?" She nodded but didn't move. Frozen. Shock setting in. Ryder had seen it before in combat. Civilians who'd witnessed too much. Brains shutting down to protect themselves from processing trauma. "Avery." He kept his voice steady, calm. "I need you to stand up. I need you to trust me one more time. Can you do that?" She stared at him with eyes that looked about 100 years old. Then slowly, shakily she stood. Ryder took her hand. It was ice cold. "Stay between me and Rosa. Don't look at anything. Just keep moving. Understand?" "The other kids," Avery said. "Emma and Bug. And they're not here. We'll find them. But right now we get you out." They started toward the stairs, made it maybe 20 feet before Ryder heard the click. His body recognized it before his brain did. Years of training, muscle memory. He grabbed both Avery and Rosa and dove sideways as the shaped charge detonated. The explosion wasn't massive, wasn't meant to collapse the building, just meant to seal the exit. The staircase disappeared in a cloud of dust and debris and twisted metal. When the smoke cleared, there was just rubble where the stairs had been. No way up. No way out. Ryder's ears were ringing. Blood ran from somewhere on his head. Rosa was coughing. Avery was screaming, but he couldn't hear it over the ringing. He forced himself up, did a quick check. Nothing broken. Nothing bleeding bad enough to kill him in the next few minutes. His phone buzzed. Text message. "Told you it was a trap. Now you're buried. Buildings rigged to collapse completely in 5 minutes. Your friends outside have a choice. Try to dig you out and die when it comes down, or save themselves and leave you. Either way, you're dead." Ryder looked at the collapsed staircase, at the concrete walls, at Rosa and Avery watching him with expressions that said they'd known this would happen. Known that rescue was just another lie. Adults told children to keep them compliant until the end. His mind raced through options. No stairs, no obvious exits. They were in a basement 2 levels underground in a building designed to be a vault. The explosion had probably weakened the structure, 5 minutes until it collapsed. Maybe less. He started moving along the walls, looking for anything. Air vents, service tunnels, maintenance access. His hands found a metal panel, rusted, old. He yanked it open. Behind it was a narrow tunnel, maybe 3 feet in diameter. Old ventilation system or drainage. No idea where it led, but anywhere was better than staying. In, now. He lifted Avery and pushed her into the tunnel. She started crawling. Rosa went next. Ryder followed, dragging himself forward on his elbows despite the fire in his ribs. The tunnel was pitch black, claustrophobic. His phone light barely penetrated. They crawled for what felt like hours but was probably 2 minutes. Avery stopped suddenly. "It's blocked," she said. "There's a grate." Ryder squeezed past Rosa in the tight space. Found the grate. Heavy metal. Bolted from the outside. He braced his back against the tunnel wall and kicked. Once. Twice. The metal groaned but held. Behind them, a deep rumble shook the tunnel. The building starting to go. He kicked again, harder. Felt something give way. One more kick and the grate flew outward. Daylight flooded in. Ryder pushed Avery through first, then Rosa, then dragged himself out into a ravine. They were at the bottom of a drainage ravine about 50 yards from the building. The tunnel had led them out a side exit that probably hadn't been used in years. Above them, Black River cold storage was collapsing. Slow at first, then faster. The roof caving in, walls folding, the entire structure pancaking down on itself in a cloud of dust and noise that sounded like the end of the world. Ryder pulled Rosa and Avery away from the building, half running, half stumbling up the ravine slope toward the parking lot. They emerged into chaos. The building's collapse had created a massive dust cloud. Visibility was near zero. Gunfire had stopped. Everyone was either dead or running or buried. Ryder couldn't see Tank or Mac or any of the Saints. Couldn't see the FBI team. Couldn't see the hostiles. Just dust and smoke and the settling debris of a building that had been standing 30 seconds ago. "Tank!" Ryder shouted. His voice was raw, barely carried through the dust. "Mac! Anyone!" No response. Just the settling of rubble and the creak of metal and the pounding of his own heart. Then figures emerged from the dust. 4 men, tactical gear, weapons raised. Not Saints, not FBI. The contractors. They saw Ryder, saw Rosa and Avery. Raised their rifles. Ryder pushed the women behind him and raised his Glock. 8 rounds left in the magazine. 4 hostiles. The math didn't work, but he aimed anyway. "Down on the ground!" one of them shouted. "Now!" "Run," Ryder said quietly to Rosa. "Take Avery and run." "I'm not leaving you. Run." Rosa grabbed Avery and bolted back toward the ravine. The contractors tracked them with their rifles. Ryder fired twice, forcing them to take cover, giving Rosa and Avery precious seconds. One of the contractors fired back. The round hit Ryder in the shoulder, spun him around. He went down hard, couldn't feel his left arm. The Glock fell from his hand. He tried to reach for it with his right hand, but his body wasn't responding. Blood was spreading across his leather jacket. Too much blood. Too fast. The contractors moved toward him. One kicked his gun away. Another pressed a rifle barrel against his head. "Should have stayed home," the man said. Then Tank appeared out of the dust like a vengeful ghost. He came in low and fast, tackling the nearest contractor, both of them going down in a tangle. Mac was right behind him, rifle cracking. One contractor dropped. Then another. Colt emerged from a different direction, pistol firing methodically. The remaining contractors scattered, returning fire, the parking lot turning into a war zone again. Tank hauled Ryder up with one massive arm. "Can you walk?" "Mom..." "Don't know." Everything felt distant, shock setting in. Blood loss. Couldn't tell anymore what was broken and what was just refusing to work. "Then I'll carry you." Tank threw him over one shoulder like a sack of grain and started running. Ryder's vision swam. He saw flashes, Agent Reeves firing from behind a vehicle, Ghost Saints mounting their bikes, more hostiles coming from somewhere, the man with the graying hair shouting orders. Then they were at the bikes. Tank threw Ryder onto his own Harley, climbed on behind him, and started the engine. Mac and Colt were already moving. The remaining Saints formed a protective circle, laying down cover fire while the wounded escaped. "Go, go, go!" Agent Reeves was screaming. The convoy exploded into motion, bikes roaring, FBI vehicles burning rubber, everyone scattering in different directions because staying meant dying. The contractors kept firing, but the dust and chaos made accurate shooting impossible. Ryder held on to Tank's bike with his one good arm, his vision graying at the edges, blood loss pulling him toward darkness. Behind them, Black River cold storage was nothing but rubble and dust. In front of them, the highway stretched empty toward salvation or damnation, depending on whether they could stay ahead of the bullets. They rode hard for 5 miles before Tank pulled over. The other Saints were scattered along the highway, regrouping, doing damage assessment. Ryder slid off the bike and collapsed. Couldn't hold himself up anymore. The shoulder wound was worse than he'd thought. The bullet had gone through but might have clipped an artery. Tank was on his phone calling for Doc Martinez. Mac was ripping open a first aid kit. Colt was doing a head count and his expression said they'd lost people. Ryder couldn't process it, Couldn't think through the fog. Just kept seeing Rosa and Avery running into the ravine. Hoped they'd made it out. Hoped someone had found them. "Stay with me." Tank was in his face, applying pressure to the shoulder wound. The pain cut through the fog like lightning. "Don't you fucking die. Not after all this. Not after we got them out." "Did we?" Ryder's voice sounded like it was coming from someone else. "Did we get them?" "Rosa and Avery are with the FBI. Reeves got them. They're safe. You did it. You kept your promise." The words should have felt like victory, should have meant something, but all Ryder felt was empty, hollow. 4 saints dead at the clubhouse, maybe more dead back at Black River. All of it because he'd decided to play hero, because he'd thought broken men could save broken children, and somehow that would fix the brokenness inside themselves. His phone buzzed. Even bleeding out, even half-conscious, he pulled it out and checked. One last text from the unknown number. "This isn't over. We're just getting started." Then the phone died. Battery drained, or maybe his vision was going and he just couldn't see it anymore. Couldn't tell the difference between darkness on the screen and darkness behind his eyes. Tank was still shouting. Mac was calling for ambulance, sirens in the distance, getting closer, law enforcement, or medical or more hostiles coming to finish the job. Ryder tried to say something. Warn them. Tell them to run. But his mouth wasn't working anymore. Everything was shutting down. His body deciding it had endured enough. That 5 years of slow suicide could finally end here on the side of a Wyoming highway, surrounded by the only family he had left. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was Tank's face above him, scarred and terrified, and behind him the morning sun rising over the mountains like the world didn't know it was ending. Like life just kept going even when individual lives stopped. Like none of this mattered in the grand scheme except to the people living through it. Then nothing. Just darkness, and the distant sound of Harley engines, and someone screaming his name, and the cold certainty that he'd either wake up in a hospital or he wouldn't wake up at all. And somewhere in that liminal space between life and death, Ryder Vale finally stopped running from the man he'd become and started wondering if there was any version of him left worth saving. The ambulance arrived 3 minutes later. Paramedics swarmed. They got him stabilized. Loaded him into the vehicle. Tank tried to climb in with him, but they wouldn't allow it. Said only family. Tank told them he was family. They told him to follow in his vehicle. The ambulance pulled away with lights and sirens. Ryder on a gurney. IVs in his good arm. Oxygen mask over his face. Barely conscious, but aware enough to know he was alive. For now. Whether that was a blessing or a curse, he'd have to decide later. Behind them, the ghost saints mounted their bikes and followed the ambulance like a funeral procession or a military escort, depending on how you looked at it. 8 bikes now instead of 23. 15 saints lost in 2 days. 15 men who'd believed in something enough to die for it. The hospital was in Black Hollow. Small regional facility. Not equipped for trauma, but it was closer than anything else. The ER staff took one look at Ryder and called for a surgeon. Started prepping him for emergency surgery. The bullet wound was worse than Tank had thought. Might have nicked the subclavian artery. He'd lost too much blood, needed transfusion, needed surgery. Needed to survive long enough for any of it to matter. Tank and the remaining saints filled the waiting room like a biker occupation, still wearing their cuts, still covered in blood and dust and gunpowder residue. The hospital security looked nervous but didn't try to make them leave. Something about men who'd just fought their way out of hell made other people decide they didn't need to enforce minor rules. Agent Reeves arrived 20 minutes later with Rosa and Avery. Both women were wrapped in shock blankets, both looking like they'd aged a decade in one night. Avery saw Tank and ran to him. He caught her in his massive arms and held her while she finally broke down completely. All the fear and trauma she'd been holding back flooding out in gasping sobs. Rosa stood beside Agent Reeves looking shell-shocked. "Is he alive?" Tank said. "For now. In surgery. Chopped it. Because of us. Because he came for us. Because that's what he does. Breaks his promises to himself to keep promises to other people." Tank's voice was rough. Been doing it his whole life. Probably die doing it, too. Agent Reeves checked her phone. "My team is processing the scene. What's left of it? Found some bodies. Both contractors and..." She paused, glancing at Avery. "Others. Early count suggests maybe 8 hostiles dead. But the man in charge escaped. The one calling the shots. He's gone." "They're all gonna run now," Max said from across the room. The video went public. The raid went sideways, networks compromised. They'll scatter, disappear, probably already destroying evidence, killing loose ends. Then we work fast. Agent Reeves's expression hardened. I've got teams hitting every location connected to mountain range properties, every warehouse, every holding company, every piece of property. If those other kids are still alive, we'll find them, and we're freezing assets, seizing records, bringing in every person even tangentially connected for questioning. Including Senator Crawford, Judge Holbrook, Police Chief Bennett, Tank asked. The people with enough power to make this all go away? Especially them. Public pressure is too high now. That video has been viewed millions of times. Every news outlet is running the story. Congress is calling for investigations. These people can't hide anymore. We've got them. Ashwant. But Tank's expression said he didn't believe it, that he'd seen too many powerful people escape justice. Too many cases collapse under legal pressure and political maneuvering. Too many victims left with nothing while predators walked free. A doctor emerged from surgery 3 hours later. She looked exhausted. He's stable. Lucky. The bullet missed the artery by millimeters. He's lost a lot of blood, but we got him transfused. Repaired the damage. He'll need physical therapy. Several months recovery. But he should make a full recovery. The relief in the room was palpable. Tank's shoulders dropped. Mac closed his eyes. Colt actually smiled for the first time in days. Avery stopped crying and looked up at Tank with something like hope returning to her face. Can we see him? Rosa asked. Not yet. He's in recovery, sedated. Give it a few hours. The doctor paused, looking at the assembled bikers with their cuts and scars and the unmistakable evidence of recent combat. I don't know what you people did. Don't want to know. But that man in there just saved 2 lives and nearly lost his own doing it. Whatever else happens, remember that. She walked away before anyone could respond. The waiting room settled into exhausted silence. People finding chairs or floor space, trying to process, trying to rest, trying to figure out what came next. Agent Reeves got a call, stepped outside to take it. When she came back in, her expression had changed. We found them. The other kids. All 6. They were in a different location. Warehouse in Montana. My team just pulled them out. Avery's head snapped up. Emma? Bug? All of them? Well, all of them, alive. They're being taken to hospitals now, reunited with families. It's over, Avery. It's finally over. But it wasn't over. Not really. Ryder could feel it even in his sedated state. Could feel that this was just the beginning. That exposing the network meant going to war with people who had unlimited resources and no morality. That the man with the graying hair and empty eyes was still out there, still planning, still coming. And when Ryder woke up 6 hours later in a hospital bed with machines beeping and tubes running into his arms, the first thing he saw was Tank sitting beside him. Welcome back, Tank said quietly. Everyone make it out? Ryder's voice was raw. Most of us. Lost 3 more at Black River. 16 Saints total dead in 2 days. Worst casualties we've ever taken. 16 dead. The number sat heavy and impossible. 16 men who'd followed Ryder into hell because they trusted him to bring them back out. 16 families destroyed. 16 futures erased. All because of promises and justice and the naive belief that doing the right thing mattered more than surviving. And the kids? Ryder asked. All safe. FBI found them. Families being notified. National news is calling you a hero. Tank's expression was complicated, which is going to make what happens next very interesting. What happens next? Tank leaned forward, voice dropping to barely a whisper. While you were in surgery, I got a call. Unknown number. Same voice as before. The man from Black River. He said this was just round 1. That we'd exposed the network but not destroyed it. That they have contingency plans and backup operations, and people in places we'd never expect. And that in exactly 72 hours, they're going to show us what real power looks like. The machines beeped faster as Ryder's heart rate spiked. What does that mean? I don't know, but he sounded confident, like he wasn't running scared, like he was looking forward to it. Tank met his eyes. Ryder, I think we didn't win. I think we just pissed off something way bigger than we understood. And it's coming for us. Let it come. Ryder tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Fire shot through his shoulder. We'll be ready. With what? We're down to 8 saints. The clubhouse is burned. We're broke. Hunted. Every cop in 3 states is looking for us because half of them still work for the network. And you're in a hospital bed with a bullet wound and broken ribs. So we rebuild, recruit, fight back. Or we run, disappear, change our names and live long enough to die of old age instead of bullets. Ryder looked at him, at his oldest friend, the man who'd pulled him out of more bars and battles than either could count, the man who'd stuck with him through 5 years of self-destruction and never once suggested giving up. You want to run? Ryder asked. Tank was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head slowly. No. I want to finish this. Want to burn their entire operation to the ground and piss on the ashes. But I needed to know you wanted it too, because this next part... He paused. This next part is going to make everything we've been through look like a warm-up. Good. Ryder settled back into the pillows, every part of his body screaming, but his mind finally clear. Because I'm tired of losing. Tired of watching good people die while monsters walk free. Tired of playing defense. So we go on offense. We go to war. Ryder looked out the window at the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, the man with graying hair was planning his next move, calling in favors, mobilizing resources, preparing to show the Ghost Saints what real power looked like. But he didn't understand what the Saints had become in the last 2 days. They weren't just a motorcycle club anymore. They were survivors of a massacre, protectors who'd bled for strangers, broken men who'd finally found something worth dying for that was bigger than their own pain. They were dangerous now in a way they'd never been before. Not because they had nothing to lose, because they had everything to lose and were willing to lose it anyway. The door opened. Agent Reeves stepped in with Avery and Rosa behind her. Avery ran to the bed, stopped just short of hugging him because of all the tubes and machines. You're awake, she said, and her smile was the first genuinely happy thing Ryder had seen in 5 years. Told you I'd keep my promise, and his voice cracked. All of you, safe. Because of you. Rosa stepped closer. Because you were insane enough to walk into that building knowing you might not walk out. All us. Wasn't insane. Was necessary. There's a difference. Agent Reeves cleared her throat. We need to talk. About what happens next. The investigation. Protection. Witness statements. You're going to be the center of a media storm. Criminal proceedings. Congressional hearings. This is going to consume your life for the next year minimum. Looking forward to it? Ryder meant it. Let them drag him through courts and hearings and investigations. Let them ask questions and demand answers. Every second of testimony was another second keeping pressure on the network. Another chance to expose another name. Another opportunity to watch powerful people squirm. There's something else, Reeves said carefully. We found evidence at Black River. Before it collapsed. Files, hard drives, banking records. Enough to connect dozens of people to the operation. But the most interesting thing was a list. Names of people who'd either participated or knew and stayed silent. Politicians, judges, business leaders, some of them very high profile. How high? Tank asked. High enough that releasing it will cause a political earthquake. Careers will end. Families will be destroyed. Some of these people weren't active participants. They just knew and looked the other way. Does that make them complicit? Legally, maybe not. Morally? She shrugged. That's above my pay grade, but I need to know before I release this information. Are you prepared for what comes next? Because once this goes public, there's no taking it back. The fallout will be massive. Ryder thought about Judge Holbrook, whose son had been held hostage for years to ensure compliance. Thought about all the other good people who'd been forced or blackmailed or threatened into silence. Thought about the thin line between victim and accomplice, and whether that line even mattered when children were dying. Release it, he said. All of it. Let the world decide who's guilty and who is just trying to survive. But don't protect anyone. Don't hide any names. The only way this ends is if we burn it all down. Agent Reeves nodded slowly. All right. Then prepare yourself. In 72 hours, when I release these files, every news outlet in the world will be running the story. And you, she looked at Ryder, you're going to become the most famous biker in America. The man who exposed a nationwide trafficking network. The hero who risked everything to save children. They're going to want interviews, book deals, movie rights. Your life will never be private again. Don't want famous, just want them stopped. You'll get both whether you want it or not. She left with promises to station agents outside his room for protection. The network's threat wasn't empty. In 72 hours, they'd retaliate, and Ryder was a sitting target in a hospital bed. But as night fell and Tank and the other Saints settled in to guard shifts, as Rosa and Avery fell asleep in chairs nearby, as the machines beeped their steady rhythm and pain medication pulled him toward uneasy sleep, Ryder felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Purpose. Not happiness, not peace, but purpose. The bone-deep certainty that he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he needed to do, even if it killed him. Maybe especially if it killed him. Because some things were worth dying for, and protecting children from monsters was at the top of that very short list. His last thought before sleep took him was of the man with graying hair and empty eyes. Somewhere out there planning his revenge, preparing his final move. Confident that power and money and connections would let him win like they always had. But he'd never fought anyone who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain by watching the world burn. The Ghost Saints were coming for him, and this time they weren't coming to rescue anyone. They were coming to end this once and for all. 72 hours came and went, like a held breath finally released. Agent Reeves made good on her promise. At exactly 9 a.m. on the third day, she held a press conference that was broadcast on every major news network. Standing behind a podium with the FBI seal, she methodically read names from the list they'd recovered at Black River. Senator Crawford, Judge Holbrook, Police Chief Bennett, 37 others. Each name followed by a brief description of their connection to the trafficking network. Some had participated actively. Others had known and stayed silent. A few had been blackmailed into compliance with threats against their own families. Agent Reeves didn't differentiate. Just read the names and let the public decide who deserved mercy and who deserved damnation. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Senator Crawford resigned within an hour. Police Chief Bennett was arrested by his own officers. Judge Holbrook held his own press conference admitting everything, showing photos of his missing son, begging whoever had him to let him go now that the truth was out. The plea was broadcast live. Within 20 minutes, an anonymous tip led FBI agents to a house in rural Montana where they found Judge Holbrook's son alive. 17 years old now. Had been 13 when taken. 4 years of his life stolen to ensure his father's compliance. The news cycle exploded. Every channel. Every website. The story of the Ghost Saints and the children they'd saved became the only thing anyone was talking about. Ryder's name and face were everywhere despite his attempts to stay anonymous. Someone had leaked hospital photos, security footage from Black River, his military record, everything. He watched it all from his hospital bed, feeling nothing except exhaustion and the dull ache of healing wounds. Tank sat beside him watching the same coverage, expression unreadable. "You're famous," Tank said. "They're calling you Captain America on a motorcycle. They're idiots." Probably. But they're idiots who want to help. My phone's been ringing non-stop. Lawyers offering free representation. Veterans groups offering support. Regular people sending money for the funerals and rebuilding. We've got $500,000 in donations already. Ryder turned away from the TV. "We don't need their money." Turned away from the was. "Yeah, we do. 16 funerals. 16 families to support. New clubhouse to build. Medical bills. Legal fees when they inevitably try to charge us with something. Pride's expensive. Help is free." He was right, but it still felt wrong. Taking money from strangers. Being treated like heroes when all Ryder felt was the weight of 16 dead brothers and the knowledge that they'd barely scratched the surface of the network. They'd exposed one cell, saved a handful of children, made some arrests, but the man with graying hair was still out there. Still free, still dangerous. As if summoning him through thought alone, Ryder's phone buzzed. New phone. Agent Reeves had given it to him with assurances it was secure, encrypted, monitored. The text that came through was from an unknown number anyway. "Congratulations, you won the battle, but wars are long and I have patience. See you soon." Ryder showed it to Tank. "He's not running." "No." He's regrouping. Probably thinks he can wait us out. That eventually the media moves on and public pressure fades and things go back to normal. Then we don't let things go back to normal. Tank studied him. You're planning something. I'm planning everything. Ryder sat up despite the protests from his shoulder. 3 days of healing, but still felt like he'd been hit by a truck. That list Reeves released, those were just the people connected to the Wyoming operation. But the network is national, maybe international. We have names, connections, financial records. We use that. Build cases. Feed information to FBI and journalists and anyone else who'll listen. Keep the pressure constant. Don't let them hide. That's Reeves' job. We're bikers, not investigators. We're both now, because law enforcement can only go so far. Jurisdiction, rules of evidence, constitutional protections. But us? Ryder met Tank's eyes. We don't have those limitations. We can go places they can't, ask questions they can't, apply pressure in ways that would get a badge fired but just makes us what we've always been. Dangerous criminals? Dangerous protectors. There's a difference. The door opened. Mac and Colt entered, followed by the remaining Saints. 8 men total now. 8 survivors of a war that had killed 16. They looked different than they had a week ago. Harder, older, like they'd aged years and days, but also more solid somehow. More purposeful. Men who'd found meaning in the worst possible way and decided it was worth keeping. Doctor says you're getting discharged tomorrow, Mac said. We've got a place lined up. Safe House FBI is lending us until we figure out permanent situation. What about the clubhouse? Burned to foundation. Insurance won't cover it because of the circumstances. But with the donations, we can rebuild. Different location, maybe. Somewhere less exposed. Mac paused. If you want to rebuild. If you want to keep the Ghost Saints going after everything. Ryder looked around at the 8 faces watching him, waiting for him to make a decision that would affect all of them. They'd followed him into hell and barely made it back out. He'd lost 16 brothers because of choices he'd made. Had no right to ask these men to stay. No right to expect them to keep following someone who got people killed. I want you to know something, Ryder said slowly. I never meant for any of this to happen. Never meant to start a war or get anyone killed. I just saw a scared kid and couldn't walk away. Everything else spiraled from that one decision. And I can't promise it won't spiral again if we keep doing this. Can't promise anyone else won't die. So if any of you want out, if you want to walk away and live normal lives, I'll understand. No judgment. No hard feelings. Silence filled the room. The 8 saints looked at each other. Some kind of wordless communication passing between them. Then Tank spoke. You're an idiot if you think we're leaving. We knew what we signed up for when we put on these cuts. Brotherhood means you don't abandon family just because things got hard. 16 brothers died. We honor them by finishing what they started, by making sure their deaths meant something. Tank's right, Colt added. I was going to eat a bullet 6 months ago. Club saved me, gave me a reason to keep breathing. Last week we saved 6 kids and exposed a network that's been destroying families for decades. That's more purpose than I've had in my entire life. I'm not walking away from that. Bullshit. One by one, the others echoed the sentiment. Different words, same meaning. They were in this. All the way. Until it ended, or they did. Ryder felt something crack in his chest. Not breaking. Opening. The part of him that had been locked away since his daughter disappeared. Since he'd lost faith that anything good was possible. These men were giving him back something he thought was gone forever. Hope. All right then, Ryder said quietly. We rebuild, but different this time. We're not just a motorcycle club anymore. We're something else. Something that fills the gaps law enforcement can't fill. That helps people who slip through the cracks. That makes monsters afraid to sleep because they know we're out there watching. You're describing vigilantes, Mac said. I'm describing protectors. There's a difference. We don't seek revenge, don't dish out justice. We find people who need help and we help them. We expose evil and let the system handle punishment. We operate in the gray areas where cops can't go, but evil thrives. And if the system fails, so Tank asked, If the cops and courts and all the official channels still let the guilty walk, then we make sure the court of public opinion doesn't. We document everything, film everything, make it impossible for anyone to claim they didn't know. Force the system to work by removing any excuse for inaction. It was ambitious, probably impossible. They were 8 broken men with a burned clubhouse and 16 fresh graves. But they also had something else now. Public attention, donated funds. A list of names connected to one of the largest trafficking networks in American history. And most importantly, they had nothing left to lose and everything to gain by burning the old world down and building something better from the ashes. Agent Reeves visited that evening. She looked exhausted. The press conference had been followed by 72 hours of non-stop interviews and briefings and coordination with field offices across the country. But underneath the exhaustion was satisfaction. 37 arrests so far, she said, settling into the chair Tank vacated. More coming. The evidence from Black River is solid. Financial records showing payments. Communications discussing operations. We're building RICO cases against everyone involved. This is going to take years to fully prosecute, but we've got them. What about the man in charge? Ryder asked. The one calling the shots. The one who sent the hit squad. Reeves' expression darkened. Still searching. We have descriptions, voice recordings, but no name, no identity. He's a ghost. Been operating in shadows for decades. Multiple agencies have encountered him, but nobody's ever gotten close enough for an arrest. So he's still out there, for now. But we'll find him, especially if he's stupid enough to come after you again. He will be. He already sent a message. Promise this isn't over. Reeves pulled out a tablet and showed him something. Security footage from the hospital. Multiple angles. Armed guards at every entrance. We've got you covered. Nobody's getting to you without going through a dozen federal agents first. Can't stay in protective custody forever. No, but you can stay alive long enough for us to find him. Then it's over. Really over. Network dismantled. Leaders in prison. Children safe. Justice served. That's the ending we're fighting for. Ryder wanted to believe her. Wanted to trust that the system would work this time. That justice would be served and evil would be punished and children would be safe. But he'd seen too much. Lost too much. Knew that even with all their effort, some monsters would escape. Some children would still slip through cracks. Some families would still be destroyed while people with power looked the other way. But maybe that was okay. Maybe you didn't have to win completely to make a difference. Maybe saving 6 children and exposing 37 predators was enough. Maybe doing something was always better than doing nothing, even if you couldn't do everything. Thank you, Ryder said, for believing Avery, for helping us, for caring when most cops would have looked the other way. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. Defense attorneys are already filing motions, claiming evidence was obtained illegally, that your raid on Grayson's ranch poisoned the investigation, that everything we found should be thrown out. They're going to attack your credibility, bring up your past, the drinking, the violence. The dishonorable discharge wasn't dishonorable, was medical. They'll claim otherwise, twist the truth, make you look like an unstable criminal instead of someone who tried to help. That's what they do. Attack the messenger when they can't refute the message. Let them. Ryder leaned back against the pillows. I know who I am. Know what I've done. Good and bad. I'm not looking for redemption or validation. Just want those kids safe and those monsters behind bars. If my reputation has to burn to make that happen, fine. I'll be the villain in their story if it means being the hero in those children's lives. Reeves smiled slightly. You sound like someone who's finally figured out who he is. Maybe he had. Ryder had spent 5 years trying to be nobody, drowning identity in whiskey and highway miles, running from responsibility and connection and anything that required him to be more than a ghost. But somewhere between that first night when Avery showed up barefoot in the snow and now, lying in a hospital bed with a gunshot wound and 16 dead brothers, he'd become someone again. Not the Marine he'd been, not the father he'd tried to be. Something new. Something built from broken pieces but functional. A protector who'd lost what he was protecting, but found other people worth protecting instead. An outlaw who operated outside the system but in service of the vulnerable. A ghost who'd finally found a reason to haunt the living. The next morning, Ryder was discharged. Tank brought clothes that didn't have bullet holes and bloodstains. Helped him dress slowly because his shoulder still screamed with any movement. The doctor gave discharge instructions that Ryder mostly ignored. Rest. Physical therapy. Follow-up appointments. Don't ride motorcycles for at least 6 weeks. Don't get shot again. That last one he couldn't promise. They walked out to a media circus. News crews everywhere. Cameras. Reporters shouting questions. FBI agents formed a protective corridor, but it didn't stop the chaos. Everyone wanted a statement. A reaction. Some piece of the story they could claim as exclusive. Ryder ignored all of it. Just kept his head down and moved toward the vehicle Tank had brought. Not a bike. A truck. Big enough to hold the 8 remaining Saints and armored enough to stop bullets if the network decided to make a move. But they didn't. The drive to the safe house was uneventful. Just highway and trees and the knowledge that somewhere out there, enemies were watching, planning, waiting for the right moment. The safe house was a ranch 40 miles outside Black Hollow. FBI had seized it from a money launderer years ago and used it occasionally for witness protection. Big enough for 8 men. Remote enough that approaching without being seen was nearly impossible. Secure enough that everyone could breathe for the first time in days. Rosa and Avery were already there, living in the main house under FBI protection until the trials started. Avery ran to meet them when the truck pulled up, moving faster than any child who'd been through what she'd been through should be able to move. But kids were resilient in ways adults couldn't understand. They healed faster, adapted better, found joy in small things even after experiencing horrors. She hugged Tank first because he was closest and least likely to break. Then she looked at Ryder standing stiffly beside the truck, his arm in a sling, face pale from pain and medication. "You look terrible," she said. "Feel worse." Ryder managed a slight smile. "But I'm alive. We all are. That's what matters." "The other kids, the ones from the warehouse, are they okay?" According to Agent Reeves, they're with their families, getting medical care and therapy. It'll take time, but they're safe now. Really safe. Avery nodded slowly, processing. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out the stuffed rabbit he'd carried into Black River. She'd kept it, somehow gotten it back after everything. It was even more torn and dirty than before, but still recognizable. "You should keep this, she said, holding it out. "For luck, in case you have to save anyone else." Ryder took it carefully. The fabric was worn thin. One ear was missing, but it was the most valuable thing he'd ever held. Proof that something good had survived, that promises could be kept even when everything else fell apart. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I'll take good care of it." "I know you will, because that's what you do. Take care of things nobody else wants to take care of." She hugged him then, careful of his injuries, and whispered something he almost didn't catch. "My mom wants to meet you, to say thank you. Is that okay?" Ryder glanced at Rosa standing on the porch. She looked nervous, uncertain, like she didn't know how to approach men who'd saved her life, but also represented everything society taught her to fear. Bikers, criminals, violence. He walked toward her slowly. The other Saints hung back, giving him space. Rosa watched him come, her hands clasped in front of her, and Ryder could see she was gathering courage for something. "I wanted to say..." She paused, started again. "I wanted to say thank you doesn't feel like enough. You saved both of us. Got shot saving us. Lost friends saving us. And I don't know I don't know what I'm supposed to... Oh. You're not supposed to do anything," Ryder interrupted gently. "You survived. That's enough. That's everything." "But you almost died. Almost doesn't count. I'm here. You're here. Avery's here. 16 brothers aren't, but that's not on you. That's on the monsters who created this situation. You're a victim who survived. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for that. Not even yourself." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "They had me for 3 days. Did things... said things... I can't stop thinking about it. Can't stop seeing their faces. Can't sleep without nightmares. Everyone keeps saying it'll get better with time, but what if it doesn't? What if I'm broken forever? Ryder recognized that question, had asked it himself more times than he could count. After combat, after losing his daughter, after 5 years of drowning without ever quite dying. He didn't have good answers because there weren't any, but he had truth. You probably are broken, he said. I am. Every man here is. We're all walking around with pieces missing or cracked or held together with spite and leather. But broken doesn't mean useless. Doesn't mean you can't heal. Just means you heal different. Become something new instead of something restored. And maybe that new version is actually stronger because it knows what it survived. Rosa wiped her eyes. Did you get therapy? After whatever broke you? No. Got a bottle and a motorcycle and a death wish. Wouldn't recommend it. But I also didn't have what you have. Support system. People who care. Resources. Agent Reeves will connect you with trauma counselors who specialize in this. They'll help. It won't be fast and it won't be easy, but it'll work if you let it. What about you? Are you getting help? Honest question deserved an honest answer. I'm getting purpose. Found out that helping people helps me. That protecting children gives me something to care about besides my own pain. It's not therapy, but it's something. Maybe that's enough. Tank appeared at his elbow. We should get inside. Standing out in the open makes me nervous. They moved into the house. It was bigger than it looked from outside. 5 bedrooms, large kitchen, living room with furniture that had seen better days but was functional. The Saints spread out, claiming spaces, setting up security protocols. Mac took first watch. Colt set up laptop and started monitoring news coverage. The others just collapsed wherever they found space, exhaustion finally catching up to adrenaline. Ryder found himself in the kitchen with a cup of coffee that Rosa had made. She moved around the space with practiced efficiency, clearly needing something to do with her hands. Avery sat at the table coloring in a book someone had given her. Normal domestic scene that felt surreal after days of violence and chaos. What happens now? Rosa asked. After the trials, after everything, what happens to us? You go home, rebuild your life, try to find normal again. What if I don't want normal? What if normal is what made me vulnerable in the first place? Single mother, low income, no support system. That's why they targeted Avery. Knew nobody would look too hard. Knew I didn't have resources to fight back. Ryder sipped his coffee. It was bad coffee, but he'd had worse. What do you want instead? I want to help. Want to make sure what happened to us doesn't happen to other families. Want to be part of whatever you're building. She met his eyes. She met his... I heard you talking to your friend about creating something new. Filling gaps law enforcement can't fill. I want in. You're a victim. You need to heal, not jump into more danger. Bongos. I'm a survivor. There's a difference. And survivors help other survivors. It's the only way any of us get through this. By taking what happened and turning it into something that prevents it from happening to others. She was right. Ryder knew she was right because he'd spent 5 years trying to heal through isolation, and it had only made him worse. Purpose was better medicine than therapy. Direction was better than peace. Maybe Rosa needed this as much as the Saints did. It won't be safe, he warned. We're going to be targets. The network won't forgive what we did. They'll come after us eventually. They already came after me. Already took my daughter. Already broke into my life and shattered it. I'm not more at risk with you than I was alone. At least with you, I can fight back. All right, but you get training, self-defense, weapons, situational awareness. You learn how to protect yourself in Avery. Deal? Rosa smiled. It was the first real smile he'd seen from her. Deal. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Healing, planning, preparing. The Saints used the safe house as a base to coordinate with Agent Reeves and other agencies. They provided testimony, identified people from photos, explained how the operation had worked from their perspective, built cases brick by brick. The trials started 3 months later. Walter Grayson went first. His lawyers fought hard, claiming evidence was tainted, that the raid on his ranch had been illegal, that everything found afterward was fruit of the poisoned tree. But Agent Reeves had been thorough. She'd gotten warrants. documented everything, built a case that didn't rely solely on what the saints had found. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Ryder testified for 6 hours, answering questions from both prosecution and defense. They tried to break him, brought up his drinking, his violence. His military discharge for PTSD made him look unstable and dangerous. But he stayed calm, answered honestly, never denied being broken, but also never apologized for trying to save children despite it. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, came back with guilty verdicts on all counts: human trafficking, child endangerment, kidnapping, money laundering. Walter Grayson was sentenced to life without parole. He showed no emotion when the sentence was read, just stared at Ryder with empty eyes and mouthed 2 words: "Not over." But it was over for him. Whatever else happened, Walter Grayson would die in prison, one monster removed from the world. The other trials followed. Some defendants took plea deals. Others fought and lost. A few actually won, their lawyers successfully arguing lack of evidence or coercion. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was more justice than usually happened in these cases. Judge Holbrook's case was complicated. He'd participated unwillingly, his son held hostage to ensure compliance. The prosecution offered a deal: testimony against everyone else in exchange for probation and mandatory therapy. He took it. Some people called it too lenient, others understood the impossible position he'd been in. Ryder didn't have strong feelings either way, just hoped the judge's son got the help he needed. 6 months after Black River, the Ghost Saints held a memorial service for the 16 brothers who'd died. They couldn't rebuild the clubhouse yet because the legal situation was still complicated, but they gathered at the cemetery where the 16 were buried. Small ceremony. Just the 8 surviving saints, Rosa, Avery, Agent Reeves, and a few others who'd become part of their extended family. Tank gave a speech. Simple words about brotherhood and sacrifice and making sure their deaths meant something. Each surviving saint placed a leather patch from their cuts on the graves, symbols of membership in a club that had become something more than just motorcycles and rebellion. Avery placed flowers on each grave. She'd asked permission, and nobody had the heart to refuse. She moved slowly from marker to marker, reading names, whispering things nobody else could hear, thanking them maybe, or promising to remember them. When she finished, she walked back to stand beside Ryder. "Do you think they're happy?" she asked. "Wherever they are. Do you think they know they saved us?" Was. Ryder didn't believe in afterlives or spirits or any of that comfort. He believed in the moment, in the tangible, in what you did with your life before it ended. But Avery was 8 years old and asking for hope, so he gave her the answer she needed instead of the one he believed. "I think they know," he said, "and I think they'd do it again." She nodded, satisfied, and held his hand. The gesture was simple, but it meant everything. Trust from someone who'd learned not to trust. Connection from someone who'd been taught that adults were dangerous. She'd chosen him to be safe. Had decided despite everything that he was someone worth believing in. He would spend the rest of his life trying to deserve that faith. The Ghost Saints officially reformed 8 months after Black Hollow. Different structure, different purpose. They were still a motorcycle club, but now they were also something else. A nonprofit organization dedicated to finding missing children and supporting trafficking victims. They worked with law enforcement but operated independently. Did the messy, dangerous work that cops couldn't or wouldn't do. The new clubhouse was smaller than the old one, more secure. Built with donations and volunteer labor from veterans groups and survivors organizations and random people who'd seen the news coverage and wanted to help. It had a memorial wall with photos of the 16 who'd died. Reminder of the cost. Motivation to make sure their sacrifice mattered. Rosa ran the victim support program. Connected survivors with resources. Provided safe housing and legal assistance and therapy referrals. She turned her trauma into purpose and helped dozens of families navigate the aftermath of similar horrors. She was good at it, patient, understanding. Proof that broken people could heal and then help others heal. Avery started 3rd grade at a new school under a new name with federal protection that would last until she turned 18. She made friends, did well in classes, saw a therapist weekly, spent weekends at the clubhouse where the saints spoiled her with motorcycle rides and terrible cooking and the kind of protective love that only dangerous men trying to be gentle could provide. She still had nightmares, still struggled with trust and attachment, but she was healing, becoming someone new, someone stronger than the trauma that had tried to destroy her. Tank became the new president of the Ghost Saints. Ryder stepped back to let him lead, recognizing that his own demons made him better as a soldier than a general. He worked cases, investigated leads, did the dangerous work while Tank handled politics and organization and keeping everyone alive. Mac found his daughter. 15 years of searching finally ended when a tip from the national database led him to a group home in Nevada. She was 28 now. Didn't remember him at first, but they were rebuilding their relationship slowly. Father and daughter separated by trafficking and finally reunited by the same network that had tried to destroy them both. Colt became the club's tech specialist, monitored dark web forums, tracked financial records, built databases of suspected traffickers and missing children. His PTSD didn't go away, but it became manageable when directed toward productive purpose instead of self-destruction. The man with graying hair and empty eyes was never found. He disappeared like smoke. Every lead went cold. Every investigation hit dead ends. But occasionally Ryder would get a message, unknown number, brief text, reminders that someone was still watching, still planning, still waiting. You got lucky once, lightning doesn't strike twice. Enjoying your fame? It won't protect you forever. I'm patient. Eventually everyone lets their guard down. Ryder saved every message, documented them, passed them to Agent Reeves, but nothing came of it. Whoever the man was, he was good at staying hidden. Probably would stay hidden until he decided to resurface. If he decided to resurface. Part of Ryder hoped he would. Wanted to finish what they'd started. Wanted to face the man who'd ordered the hit on the clubhouse and make him answer for 16 deaths. But another part was content to let it be. They'd won what mattered, saved children, exposed a network, made the world slightly less dark. That had to be enough because trying to fix everything just led to more loss. 1 year after Black Hollow, Ryder found himself in the same diner where Avery had first appeared. Different circumstance, different purpose, but same location, same booth, same terrible coffee. Agent Reeves sat across from him looking tired but satisfied. We closed the last of the cases yesterday. 31 convictions, 4 acquittals, 23 plea deals. Network is dismantled. Financial assets seized. Victims compensated as much as possible. It's done, Ryder. It's actually done. Until the next network starts up. Probably. But that's not on you to fix. You did what you could. Saved lives. Changed the system. Made it harder for monsters to operate. That's a win. Take it. Ryder sipped his coffee. Still terrible. Some things never changed. What about you? What happens to the FBI agent who partnered with a biker gang? Got promoted, actually. Turns out breaking the biggest trafficking case in a decade looks good on performance reviews. They're assigning me to a task force, national level, dedicated to fighting networks like the one we took down. I'll be coordinating with law enforcement across the country. And I want the Ghost Saints involved. Official consultants, paid positions, working with us instead of around us. We're criminals. You're survivors with skills we need. There's paperwork that makes it legal. Trust me. It was an olive branch. Recognition that the system and the outlaws could work together when both sides actually cared about the mission more than the rules. Ryder thought about it. About what it would mean. Trading complete independence for legitimacy. Having resources and backup, but also oversight and restrictions. I'll talk to Tank, he said finally. It's his decision now. I'm just a soldier. Boss, what? You're more than that and you know it. But fine, talk to Tank. Get me an answer in a week. The offer expires after that. She left cash for the coffee and walked out into the morning light. Ryder stayed in the booth watching the sunrise through the diner window. Same view as a year ago. But everything else was different. He was different. The world was different. Still dark in places. Still broken. But with more light than before. More hope. More people willing to fight. His phone buzzed. Text from Tank. Avery's birthday party this afternoon. Don't be late. Ryder smiled slightly. A year ago, he'd had nothing, no purpose, no family, no future except slow death disguised as living. Now he had all three. Found family in a biker club. Purpose in protecting the vulnerable. Future in the work they were building together. He paid his bill and walked outside to where his bike waited. Rebuilt after Black River. Same frame. New paint. Still his. He climbed on, felt the engine rumble to life. and headed toward the clubhouse where 8 brothers and 2 survivors and one 8-year-old girl who'd started everything waited for him. The highway stretched empty ahead, mountains in the distance, sky clear and blue, perfect riding weather. Ryder opened the throttle and felt the wind tear at his leather jacket, cold and clean and alive. He thought about the 16 brothers buried in Black Hollow Cemetery, about the children they'd saved and the ones still out there waiting to be found, about the man with empty eyes still planning revenge, about the endless work of trying to make the world less terrible one case at a time. It wasn't a happy ending, wasn't even really an ending at all. Just a pause, a breath, a moment of peace before the next fight started. But maybe that was okay. Maybe life wasn't about achieving perfect endings. Maybe it was about finding meaning in the struggle, about choosing every day to be someone who protected instead of someone who destroyed, about turning pain into purpose and trauma into strength and loss into motivation to save the next person who needed saving. The Ghost Saints weren't heroes. They were broken men doing broken things in a broken world. But they were trying, fighting, refusing to let darkness win without a fight. And maybe that was the most anyone could do. Maybe trying was enough. Ryder thought about his daughter Sophia. Wherever she was, whoever she'd become. He'd lost the chance to protect her, but he'd found other children to protect instead. It wasn't the same, would never be the same. But it was something. A different kind of fatherhood, a different kind of family. He wondered if she'd ever hear his story. If she'd see the news coverage and recognize his name. If she'd know that her father, who'd failed her so completely, had spent the last year trying to make sure no other child suffered the way he'd watched her suffer. Probably not. She was 15 now, had a new father, a new life, didn't need the ghost of her biological dad haunting her with attempts at redemption. Some failures couldn't be fixed. Some losses were permanent. Learning to live with that was part of growing up. The clubhouse appeared ahead. Bikes in the parking lot. Decorations visible through the windows. Tank's truck pulling in with a cake. Rosa herding Avery inside while the girl protested she wanted to wait for everyone. Normal scene. Domestic. Safe. Ryder pulled in and killed his engine. Sat there for a moment listening to the cooling metal tick. Feeling the stillness after motion. The peace after chaos. The strange, quiet joy of having somewhere to be that mattered. Tank appeared in the doorway. "You gonna sit out here all day, or are you coming inside?" "Coming." Ryder dismounted slowly, his shoulders still stiff on cold mornings. Walked toward the clubhouse. Toward family. Toward purpose. Toward a future that a year ago he couldn't have imagined wanting. Inside, Avery ran to him with a drawing she'd made. Crude crayon picture of motorcycles and a clubhouse, and people holding hands under a sun that took up half the page. She'd written words along the bottom in careful letters. "My family." Ryder took it and felt something break open in his chest. Not breaking apart, breaking open. Letting in light he'd been keeping out for years. He looked at the drawing, at Avery's hopeful face, at the saints gathered around watching him with knowing expressions. "It's perfect," he said quietly. "Best gift I've ever gotten." "Better than a motorcycle?" Avery asked skeptically. "Way better, because motorcycles break down eventually. But family?" He looked around at Tank and Mac and Colt and Rosa and the others. "Family's forever." Tank snorted. "That's the sappiest thing I've ever heard you say." "Shut up and cut the cake." They gathered around the table. 8 saints and 2 survivors and one 8-year-old girl singing happy birthday out of key and off rhythm. Laughing, eating terrible cake, making new memories to replace the old ones. Outside, the sun climbed higher. The day warmed. The world kept turning like it always did. Somewhere out there, children were still missing. Monsters were still hunting. Evil was still winning more often than good. But not today. Not in this moment. Not in this small clubhouse where broken people had found each other and decided that being broken together was better than being broken alone. Ryder stood at the window watching the highway. Always watching, always waiting. The soldier in him couldn't fully relax. Couldn't forget that threats were still out there. That the man with empty eyes might come back. That this peace was temporary and fragile. But the protector in him had learned something in the last year. Learned that you couldn't save everyone. Couldn't fix everything. Couldn't undo the past or guarantee the future. All you could do was show up every day and try. Fight the fights you could win. Save the people you could reach. Build the family you could protect. And when you failed, when you lost brothers, or missed children, or let evil escape, you mourned the loss and then got back up and tried again. Because trying was all any of them had. Trying and the thin hope that eventually, if enough people tried, maybe the world would tip slightly toward light instead of darkness. It wasn't much, but it was something, and something was always better than nothing. Avery appeared beside him holding a piece of cake. You okay? Yeah, just thinking. About sad stuff? A little, but also happy stuff. About how we all ended up here. About the family we made from broken pieces. About second chances and how sometimes the scariest people turn out to be the safest. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Kids who'd survived trauma understood things adults tried to protect them from understanding. She'd seen monsters in human skin. Had learned that safety wasn't guaranteed and adults couldn't always protect you, and sometimes you had to save yourself. But she'd also learned that some adults would try anyway, would risk everything to pull you out of hell, would get shot and watch their friends die and keep fighting because your life mattered to them even though they barely knew you. The monsters stopped when you came, Avery said quietly, echoing the words from her crayon drawing a year ago. And they're still stopped because you're still here. Ryder looked down at her, at this fierce, brave child who'd survived hell and come out still capable of trust, still capable of hope, still capable of believing that scary men in leather jackets could be heroes if you gave them the chance. We're still here, he corrected gently. All of us. And we'll keep being here as long as you need us. That's what family does. We show up, we protect, we stay. She smiled and went back to the party. Ryder stayed at the window a moment longer, watching, waiting, ready. The road ahead was uncertain, dangerous, full of threats they couldn't predict and enemies they couldn't see. But they'd face it together. The ghost, saints, and the survivors they'd saved, and anyone else who needed protection from a world that too often protected the wrong people. It wasn't a perfect ending. It wasn't even a real ending, just a stopping point, a breath, a moment to celebrate survival before the next fight started. But maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Ryder turned away from the window and walked back to his family. The broken men who'd become brothers. The survivors who'd become warriors. The child who'd become their purpose. Outside, the Montana wind whispered through the pines. The highway stretched empty toward horizons they couldn't see. The world kept spinning forward into an unknown future. But inside the clubhouse, surrounded by leather and laughter and the messy, complicated love of found family, Ryder Vale finally understood something he'd been searching for his entire life. He was home. This is the end of the Ghost Saint story. Sometimes the scariest men become the safest place for the broken to heal. Sometimes promises get kept even when everything says they won't. Sometimes family isn't blood. It's the people who show up when everyone else walks away. And sometimes, just sometimes, trying to save someone else is exactly how you save yourself.